I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 11 minutes. If you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. All right, welcome everybody. Episode 67 of the VonDubCast. Can't believe the numbers I'm saying. I thought it'd be years before I hit an episode or a number like 67, but really special one this week. Second episode of Lloydminster May with two very cool guys from Lloyd, Tanner Applegate and Ken Rutherford. Met these guys through Sean Newman's podcast. Heard Ken on there and really appreciated what he had to say, really appreciated his mindset and kind of where he comes from and how his mind works and how it's always coming from a place of kindness and helping others. And I think that is something that we're missing. And when I heard that he was starting his own podcast with this guy named Tanner, I knew I had to check it out. And their relationship is very interesting to me. Tanner and Ken couldn't be more similar and couldn't be more different at the same time. I think you guys will hear that from this episode. I think from the first time you hear Tanner talk, you'll kind of get the Cole's notes of who he is as a person. I think you can get that just from about 30 seconds of listening to him talk. He's quite commanding, quite an impressive guy in his own sense, quite intimidating, but also has a very strong moral compass. And I think that's what brings him and Ken together, is they both have just a very strong set of values that they see and that they don't compromise from. And sorry, that's something that I think is super admirable and something we could all aspire to. So their podcast really brings that forward, and the balance of the more the harder and softer sides of life and how that pertains to being strong. I know it's kind of silly, or might sound silly to hear the softer side of being strong and that sort of thing, but I think they really bring forward a full range of what life is from both their perspectives, and I really enjoy the conversations that they have. They have some tough conversations, and they go to the dark places, and they're not scared to shy away from some of the conversations that I try to do here, and just like any conversation like myself where people are telling you can't have, they like to have it, and it really brings out some really fun episodes, and I encourage everybody to check out the War on Weakness. It's available on all platforms. Another thing they got going on, Ken more so than Tanner, but it's not just Ken, it's Ken and Sean Newman and a whole bunch of eager beavers from the Lloyd area are doing a bike trip. They're doing something that's called Bike for Breakfast. It's going to be a little later on in the year. It's a 1,000-kilometer bike ride to Tufnell, Saskatchewan, 1,000 kilometers in total. It's about 500 and some there, 500 and some back, to raise money for schools and breakfasts for children. And just kind of what they saw was that throughout this pandemic, the kids have really been the ones suffering and paying the price, and they're the ones that need a little help, and they looked at themselves and those around them and said, what can we do and how can we help? And they decided to not just sit around and hope for somebody else to do it. They're doing it themselves, and I really appreciate that. As well, there's something this Thursday, May 13th, coming up at the Fourth Meridian Brewery in Lloydminster, Alberta. It's a pizza and beer, $10. You get a slice of pizza and a beer from Fourth Meridian, and Domino's are donating that. All the money goes towards raising money for this Bike for Breakfast. They have some really lofty goals for what kind of money they want to raise, and I think it's just such a good cause, and I can't support it enough. I'm sure you'll be hearing about it all month during Lloydminster May is all the updates, but this is kind of the first things I can push people towards. If you're in Lloyd this Thursday, please go check it out. It's from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Be lots of fun there, and it's all for a good cause, so please check that out. And then any other fundraisers along the way that is raising money for this Bike for Breakfast, I don't know what even want to call it, project or idea or goal, whatever it is. I think it's all amazing and all really helping kids that are in need, and it's really inspiring me to check in with myself and see what more I can be doing to help my community and the people around myself. And I think that's just almost more noble than all the other stuff. Is just that thing right there, is forcing people to show you don't just need to wait for other people to do cool things to jump on. You can start them yourself. You can start it from scratch, and that's what they're doing. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. This was I think I just did a solo episode the other week where I talked about kind of the whole trip to Lloyd and what it was like, and that weekend I had so much fun. I had hoped that I would connect with Tanner and Ken like I thought I would when I rolled in, but you never really know until you sit down. And I was just blown away at how well we all got along, and just how being different as Tanner and Ken are. I think I'm different in my own way as both of them, but there's something with us all that brings us together, and I'm hoping that you guys can kind of put your finger on what that is throughout this episode today. And I think it's something in the scope of just leading with what can help others, and trying not to get caught up in tribal games, whether it's from the left or the right, of what they want you to think, and in the talking points they want you to spew out, and more just taking it upon yourself and doing your own research, and asking yourself what feels right and what seems true to you, and following that, and being true to yourself, and not compromising, and being open to new information. I think that is at the core of it, kind of what we're all trying to do. We talk a lot about balance. We talk about the consequences of limiting discussion. We talk about freedom and what freedom truly is, and kind of the misinterpretations of freedom that we can have. And I think I'd never really looked at freedom the same way until Tanner gave us, as you'll hear on this podcast, Tanner gave us his idea of what freedom is to him. And I definitely, it's not exactly what I would, the lens I would look at freedom through, but it definitely has some points. And I think I definitely wasn't thinking of freedom from a viewpoint where I was really encapsulating all that goes within it. And I think I was missing some pieces. So that's what's cool about this, is you have an idea like that of something so integral to you like freedom, and you find out, I haven't even been looking at that concept from the right lens. There's a whole other part of this that I'm missing. And for somebody just to help you see that is awesome. And that's a gift that I get every day doing this podcast. I get to change my decisions, or change my mindset, and change my my viewpoint on a lot of these big ideas because of other people and how they have thought of them and the work that they've done. And I get to just, copy their work and take it all in. And I just feel very thankful for that I get to experience that. Other than that, Bike for Breakfast, check out their podcast, check out their social medias. Tanner also runs Viking Gym in Lloyd, so if you could check that out as well. Really great place. If you listen to Tanner, I'm sure you'll understand that if you want to get pack on a little bit of muscle, he's probably the guy to help you out. And I think you'll be able to hear that from his voice. If not, or unless I can find a picture of him to throw up as well, that'll really get my point across. But I hope you guys are doing well. I hope the latest I know we talk a lot about restrictions, and maybe I should just caveat this with saying this was over a month ago that this was recorded, and at the time we were talking about is a different situation, different set of regulations that we're working within, and just have a little bit of compassion if we misspeak or some of the things we say don't match up with the latest and greatest and what's going on these days. Try and have a bit of compassion for us. We're doing the best we could with the information we had at the time, and that's just honestly how you feel, how we felt in the moment. And I'm hoping that people understand that and can see that that's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to force anyone to think differently. It's just us with what research we've done and how we see things, and just maybe some other areas where there's important pieces that aren't getting the limelight that they need, and are really crucial aspects to this whole thing that we think there should be some emphasis put on, as well as some of the other things that are clearly being emphasized throughout this pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But just recognize this was a couple weeks ago. Things have changed. I'm sure we would have had a ton to say about this latest round of restrictions if the three of us were together to pick them apart and to have our say on them. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Like I say every time, if you could pass this episode on to a friend if you enjoy it, if you think they'd enjoy it, if you could give the social medias for the VonDubCast a follow, subscribing on the YouTube page. I know it's behind, and I'd say this every week. I'm getting it caught up. I've got more plans in the more irons in the fire, more plans at coming to fruition that are going to help get it caught up. I know I say that every week, but I promise it's happening. The Twitter page still has like 23 followers. I think the Twitter page is probably the most underutilized thing. I share a lot and I retweet a lot of really important information, I think, from that the VonDubCast account. I think it's dub_Von. Again, I didn't pick that. That just was the name that was given to me when I thought I got the VonDubCast handle on Twitter. But that one is something you guys could follow. That would be really helpful. Instagram, that's where I've been sharing most of the stuff. The Facebook page for it. Trying to get some conversation going in the comments. If you do, I'll respond. We'll get... I just want to get some conversation about these topics that I get to talk about on these podcasts. I want to get some conversation going with you guys and the ones that are listening, so I can hear from you guys what parts you enjoy, what parts you don't enjoy, what parts you guys want to hear more of, that kind of thing. That only starts if I get the conversations going, and I'm loving the conversation that's happening in the DMs. So many people have reached out, and we've had some really interesting conversations about some of these topics that come up on the podcast, and I get to hear other people's takes, and really helps me solidify my ideas and to take in more information and to not get too stuck in what I'm thinking. But I really think it'd be cool to show people these types of conversations and to do it in more of a public platform. Don't stop the DMs. Those are great, and I would love to keep those going, but I'd love for people to have the confidence to bring those ideas out and maybe do it in the comments section of some of these things. It also kind of helps, just the algorithms and all that helps more people find this podcast and helps me grow some of my goals. So it's kind of a 2-for-1, getting two birds stoned at once, as Ricky likes to say. Oh man, I can almost do a whole episode on Trailer Park Boys one of these days. I'll have to find the right guest to come on, and we'll go down my my love of that. That's one of the funnest things with this podcast. I just get to find random things like that I'm passionate about, and find the right guest and try and bring that to you guys. I just did on John Mayer that I'm really excited for you guys to hear. You'll get to hear just how deep that my love for him goes. Yeah, well, have a great time, and I'll see you guys on the outro. Bye.
Usually.
Awesome. Well, really happy always to get somebody on the podcast that knows the ropes, and have a couple guys that have been in the game for 13 episodes here so far and have going strong. I really enjoy listening to it. Thanks for being here, Tanner and Ken.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I find with the podcast, I'm always trying to find like what types of guests I have on. And my rule of thumb is just whatever interests me, as long as I'm genuinely interested in it, I'm good to let her buck and bring those people on. I find that podcasting is one of those things where if anybody knows podcasts or gives me any sort of in that they listen to them or are around it at all, I could talk that for hours, right? Just like this morning when I was talking MMA with Andrew, that's one of those things I could talk about for hours. And just the way I listen to you guys talk about it and what you guys get out of the podcast, it just made me know that right away we were going to click and we are going to have a good time on this. So I'm curious and starting it off, just asking you guys, since you guys have started the podcast now, you've done it for a little while now, what kind of things do you get out of it? Like, what has it done for you guys, and what are your favorite parts of it? And maybe if there's any parts that you don't like, you could maybe fill me in on those too.
Go ahead, Tanner.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Well,
and I can start too if you guys want. I can answer my own question.
Sometimes I've got to think about.
Of course.
Well, I like podcasts. I'm a fan of them.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, and I don't know. Kenny and I talked a little bit off the start about when we started it about that. I find it educational, and see, for me, I can't read very good. So when I started listening to podcasts, I just started to learn stuff. Yeah. So I always had a bit of a, what would you say, kind of a admiration for him. To make one was kind of cool, but it was a completely different animal to what you think the guys are doing compared to what actually is going on. It's like actors in a way, I found, where you actually talk different. It takes you about 3 or 4 to realize you can't just have a conversation like you do. So that was interesting. But no, we call it's the War on Weakness. That's the name of our podcast. And I'm not a big fan of weakness, never have been. And I wanted to do something to try to help people find ways to be stronger, be less soft, I guess you'd say. So what better way than to find something that I found educational and force it down the throats of others.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do that. I think that's what it feels like for all of us. But I feel like on one of the podcasts I'd heard you mention that you tried to start a couple before and it didn't really work out. Yep. What do you think is different about? Is it just Ken, or do you think there's anything else that makes this one special, that makes it that's getting it a little bit further down the goal line there?
You know what is as crazy as that sounds, you might be right. I had a couple guys that I did one by myself that I tried to do, and then I had a couple other fellas, great dudes.
Yeah.
But either you have a dynamic of being able to do it yourself, like a Joe Rogan, like we talked about him in the previous, or you have to have a dynamic between two personalities, right?
Yeah.
And I think to listen to me talk for an hour or two would it would drive like you. That would be the worst thing anybody could ever probably do. Like it would just be terrible to like. 'Cause I'm pretty dark and probably not the most colorful, I guess, when I get into stuff and kind of morbid and stuff. So when I would go, I had a couple other guys that I started to do it with, and they were just. I didn't get pushed into out of where I go too far into places, like you say, and it was just there was no color to it. It was just this dark gray. And then Ken and I started talking, and we both have the exact same outcome in mind when we podcast and when we talk, everything. You know, we met fighting, and so we both, you know, well, we grew up beside each other, but that's kind of where we reconnected. And we just found that, and I don't know if I believe that we intended for it, but there's a dynamic that, like, this is our number one, I guess. What would you say? The number one thing that people like about our podcast is the dynamic.
Yeah.
Because there's the way that I am, and then there's the way that Ken is. He's like a diplomatic, kind of professional guy, super nice guy, like just like, he's the kind of guy you like make the godfather of your children.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, you know, like he's like,
sure.
you're cool Uncle Ken, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like the uncle that just got out of prison and can't be around the kids. You know what I mean? Like gets drunk and punches your mom and then swears and slams the door and leaves. So when we started it, you know, as you start getting sick of listening to me talk, you listen to Ken and it changes the dynamic of everything. Then you get listened to Ken for too long and maybe you start, you know, thinking that the world's too nice of a place, and then you talk to me.
Get balanced out.
Come back into
and that's exactly what I was thinking you were going to say, because I think that dynamic does work so well, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that darkness. I feel like that's one of my favorite parts of that podcast, because I feel like today's society, we don't get enough of that. I feel like people are so eager to shy away from the darkness, but the darkness is in all of us, and it's very important, and it's crucial to being a very well-rounded person. But it's nice to have somebody like Ken that is so bright and so uplifting, and that's what I find, and it balances it out so much. Just like you said, it's got that. And when you start, I don't think there's ever too far that you can go down that road, because wherever you go is where you go, right? Like I think, but it might be too dark for some people, right? And I feel like that's where Ken can bring it back and to balance it out, and it helps you to refigure where your thoughts on these certain subjects and to see the other side of it. And I find that for me as a listener really balances that out. But I feel like there isn't enough of people going to those dark areas, because there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of wisdom to be gained over on that side of the spectrum, right? And I find that I really enjoy that aspect of it. And just before I throw it over to Ken to kind of ask the same question, I just wanted to bring up the point of what a different dynamic that is of having a guest on, or not even a guest, but somebody to work off of and doing it by yourself. Because I've just recently started venturing into doing my solo podcast and I think I've done 5 episodes so far. And that is a very different skill. Just sitting there trying to talk to yourself. It is, it's different, but the first one was hard. The second one was a lot easier, that step. And now it's just incrementally getting, just like this is, it gets a little bit easier every time. But I was very surprised by how different those two muscles are, that kind of ranting, bringing your own things, just not letting it.
Maybe a good skill. Like I'm halfway through your COVID, or your name to be decided.
Like we can say it. I just didn't want to put it in the title, just to Phil Tanner. And just last weekend, I was just so sick of so much of the misinformation and the fear and the fear mongering around COVID that I just sat there for an hour and a half and just blasted up my screen and just said all the research that I've done, all the podcasts I've listened to, and all the questions that need to be asked that aren't being asked. And I heard you guys have some similar talks, and I loved it. And I feel like I got a lot of inspiration from it, that you guys are brave enough to go out and have that talk as well. But one of the things I found is I did an episode pretty early on with a couple Masters of Geology students from the U of A about just the demonization of oil and gas. And they were doing this open letter to Justin Trudeau about just what they'd like to see. And it was very even keel. It showed the benefits and the negatives, right? The both sides of the scale, and showed the importance of climate change and how you can't totally take that off the table. You have to be balancing it. But the solution isn't just to demonize a whole industry. And we had a great conversation, right? And it was very well balanced. It wasn't an attack whatsoever if you actually listen to the episode, but just because I put Justin Trudeau's name in the title, I couldn't share it. I couldn't do anything with it because it was political. Yeah. And
What do you mean you couldn't share it?
They wouldn't let me promote it. They wouldn't let me do anything on Instagram or Facebook. Like, you've probably seen me promote a couple posts, right? Just those normal things. I was getting held back with those. It got terrible downloads. It wasn't showing up in people's feeds.
What?
So I learned that lesson. Really? And then you mentioned COVID and anything, and I knew. So that's why I talked about it. It was like, I've wanted to do this COVID episode for a long time, but I didn't want to deal with all that headache of being, it's not even that it's a big deal that people don't get to hear it. That's whatever. I get enjoyment out of recording the episode. If nobody hears it, that's whatever. I get so much positivity out of just doing this. I enjoy it so much that it doesn't really matter, but it's just personally, I just hate that feeling of being suppressed, of having my freedoms diminished in any sort of way, which that you can come up with a million ways where our freedoms are more infringed than that. It's not the biggest deal in the grand scheme of things, but it is an annoyance. It's that buzz in your bonnet that, you wish things were a little bit different and things were set up a little bit different so you didn't have to deal with that. So that's that was my middle ground. If I just don't put COVID in the title, I just call it something else. I allude to it, and then I can, I didn't get any sort of dings. I didn't even put it in.
Title either.
Yeah, but that was my worry. I was doing this whole COVID episode, but I didn't want to call it the COVID episode, right?
Yeah.
But and I've I just released it this morning, so I haven't had too many, but I've had a couple of people text me, and I've had actually one guy that said, "Hey, would love to," because I said a couple times throughout, like, if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, I'd love to have a discussion. I just want to be able to talk about this, because my biggest thing throughout is talking about, I'm more upset that we're not allowed to talk about these things, because discussion is where you find solutions and where you find progress. If you shut down the whole conversation around it, now you're at the whim, you're at somebody else's whim. And I never like that. I want to be able to be self-sufficient, self-accountable, and let myself make my decisions. When you're barring somebody from having a discussion around that to even come up with their own opinion, that's dangerous to me. And I know you guys know this, and that's why I'm excited to talk to you. There's a lot of red flags there if you've read any history of some of the worst things in the world. Of all that is exactly what you see before. Banning books, banning speech, compelled speech, all those things. They're the biggest red flags before every major atrocity in the entire history. And you see it all over the place, and people are just...
Well, you're a Northern Alberta boy. We were talking.
Yes, sir.
So you're probably going to have some alignment with us. Like Tanner always laughs, always calls us, we're from north of the river.
Yeah, I was saying all with the north of the river.
I clean up okay,
it's
but
be on a t-shirt.
When
you said it on this one now. So far, every podcast we've ever done, Kenny says north of the river.
What that means is that, first of all, Lloydminster is already a tough town. Like we just it's a working person's town. It's got an army base close by, lots of oil field workers. It's lots of entrepreneurs. It's probably what you're used to up in Northern Alberta.
Very much like Slave Lake.
And so the nice thing about that is that I like it. It fits me. I mean, I did the same as you. Went off to university for a few years, but I find it's my home to be around people who are rough, tough, can take care of their own problems, figure their way, drop them off in a bush for 3 days, and they'll find a way to survive. And that's kind of where we're from. And that's kind of ingrained into us, and now into my own children. And this just doesn't feel right, to a person who is a free thinker. I'm going to say farmers, entrepreneurs, small towns. I find there's a lot of independent thinking. And I'm with you, is that this whole just shut up and just follow the science and just do what you're told, and it just doesn't fit right. And it's hard to put us into those boxes, I find. And I mean, you've heard the podcast. Tanner's extremely dark on it. I hope he's wrong. But it's I just don't see anything that can come. The good comes from shutting down debate.
Exactly.
Shutting down discussion. If you're for more immigration and I'm for less, why don't we just have an open discussion about it and talk the pros and cons? And then if you're right, the public will say, you know what, Nick's points are way better on that. We should absolutely be increasing immigration. Sure. Perfect. That's how we're supposed to roll. But this whole thing of limiting conversation and silencing each other, that just doesn't feel like a good path to me.
Yeah. And I feel like there's that. And then there's another aspect to it, just to add on to that, is now when you have the discussion, now the person that, I mean, you're going to call it a loser, but the person where the side of the debate you were behind isn't the winning out one. At least because that discussion got to take place and you got to see the points behind it. Now you are so much better at following those rules and going along with it, right? Like if there's a vote on something, right? If a lot of us, if in this room we're voting to do the podcast out here and over there. If Tanner's dead set on staying in here, but I want to go in that house, if there's no discussion, it's just Tanner says, no, this is what we're doing. We're staying in here. I'm not going to feel very good about that. But if we have a conversation and we find it and that's where we decide on or vote on, now everybody's more often ready to go with that. But so much about all of these big issues as of late, they're shutting down the conversation around it. And now and then they wonder why is everybody so pent up and so riled up about this? It's because we're forcing these things upon people without any sort of due process and any sort of conversation around them to even bring up these points. I think one of the biggest things with COVID is that it's so clear to anybody that has a head on their shoulders that there's a lot of negative externalities that come with some of the regulations they're putting in, right? Mental health, loss of jobs, all these sorts of things, right? Loss of socialization for kids. But because they're not allowing any conversation around it, the politicians are saying, oh yeah, no, we took all those things in mind when we made these decisions. But how do we know? I want to see some conversation around that so you can prove to us that, you've said, we understand that this is bad for mental health. We understand this is bad for our kids. We understand all this. And even with that still, we still think this is the right move, right? Then at least you're giving us some lip service or some sort of taste that there's some sort of process going behind the scenes where, because there's no conversation, it just seems like they're willy-nilly throwing these out because they're only putting the one factor that's on their heads is the least amount of cases. That's the only factor that they're taking into account, or that's at least how it feels. And we have to go on how it feels because there's no conversation around it. If we could converse and talk about it, then we wouldn't have to go off what it feels like. We'd know. Or at least we'd have an idea.
It's interesting. Like Ton and I have spent a lot of time talking about it. As we've all come through I never want to hear the word COVID. Lockdown,
no, nobody does. Nobody does.
But what I want has no relevance. It's here. Mm-hmm. It's in front of us. It's every day. And we just, both Saskatchewan, Alberta just came out with more restrictions, more lockdowns. So as much sick as we are talking about it, it's in front of our face and it's affecting our communities. And I'm trying to reason my way through, as we all are.
Yeah.
And I think I can speak for myself as I've gone through different emotions where I'm really mad and really pissed off. And then I'm going through times where I'm depressed and I'm going times where maybe I should just sell off everything and move to another country, I've gone through it all. And, I think as I'm watching here in Lloydminster area, I'm going to guess it's going to be like your Grand Prairie. I don't know. It's got this weird vibe right now to where I won't ever name a name, but, things I've seen and people I've talked to, a lot of professionals in the area. I teach at the college, have friends that are nurses and other occupations. Yeah. And it feels like it's not going to be all of us. There's some people that are think this is deadly and it runs and the third of us are going to die. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. I don't know. I'm not here to debate that. But what I get a sense of is a lot of people are like, this is BS, but I'm not sticking my head out of the hole because I don't want to get the whack on the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes, look, and what I mean by that, and I'm included in that, is that to go out and voice that I think that this is crap because of what it's doing to our children.
Right.
Is that by me not being louder about it and not taking a firm stance, I'm kind of agreeing with it through complacency and silence. And that wears heavy on me.
It does. Yeah.
Because we're all just kind of looking at each other. I mean, Tanner's better at it, but to all of us is that, the nurses that don't agree, but they don't want to lose their job and you can't blame them. So you have to keep their mouth shut. The doctors that don't agree, they got to keep their mouth shut, or everybody's been told, or the teachers, or you name it. You're just not supposed to talk about it. But we all kind of know what it's doing.
Yeah.
But we're not really doing anything. Yeah. And it's this weird human dimension, isn't it? It's where we're all just kind of saying, I'm just going to quietly not say anything.
Right.
Because it's not, I don't want to be directly affected. Now, if the statement you made is correct, is that the mental health, increased drinking, increased drug use, unemployment, mental health issues, calls. Have you seen the stats on calls to children helplines, just suicide attempts by children? Son of a bitch, man! You hang that one. That hangs heavy on the soul.
Yeah, it does.
And here we are. And what are we doing? What are we doing? Like really, folks. They come up with the COVID daily update every. I don't even listen to it anymore.
Yeah, me neither. I stopped about a month in. Yeah.
As we're sitting here, there's probably a couple more calls from kids saying, "I'm thinking about taking my own life." What the hell?
It's painful. And one of the biggest things that still stuck with me from your guys' podcast was something Tanner said. I think this is something that Tanner said is, in 10, 20 years from now, when your kids are asking you about what you did and that.
No, that was Ken that said that.
Yeah, or maybe Ken that said that.
Yeah.
And they asked you, what, did you say anything? Did you speak up about it? If you knew, if it was so obvious at the time, which I think a lot of people are going to be saying in a couple of years that, man, it was obvious. Not that this is a sham or this is a hoax or anything, but that there was better ways to do things. And that the only reason we went with this plan A that never changed, like we decided the way we were going to handle this a week into this pandemic, we decided, and we've never changed course from there. And it seems very obvious to people, but you don't say anything. I'm one of those people where I'll go down with the ship, but as long as I say what I mean and I can stand by it and my own values, like I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't. That's why I put that COVID podcast together and said what I felt on it. Because at least now
I've done my part. Hopefully I gave some good information to some people and opened some eyes to some things that are going on, because there's a lot of shady shit. It's very easy for people just to classify that all is conspiracy theory nonsense. And I think a lot of it is that, but there's a lot of things that are actually happening that you can point out to people that aren't conspiracy theories, aren't this. It's just reality, and it's just incentives. It's the way the world works. And if you can point that out to people in the right way, where it hits them and they can understand that this isn't evil. It's not some nefarious group of people that are planning all this and doing this. This is just the incentives of how our structure works that brings this things upon, right? If you can make politicians where the only thing they have to worry about, the only thing they're accountable to is case numbers, this is the response we're going to get. Unless the people stand up and force different things they want them to be accountable for, unless the entire population stands up and says, we don't care about case numbers, we care about our children's health, right? Or we care about case numbers plus our children's health. You need to be accountable for this, 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 and this to get us through this. This is what we value. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. They're just going to do whatever steps they have, not because they're bad people, but that's the incentives that have been put in front of them. If you say this is the one parameter you're going to be judged on is case numbers, obviously why not lock everything down? Why not weld people into their houses like you do in China, right? If that is the logical next steps, and obviously they won't take it that far because they're balancing the pushback that they're already getting. And you see the only times they've shifted from this mindset of how they're going to handle it is when people balk, right? And
the nutballs and the outcasts and the conspiracy theorists and the people that are just trying to destroy society. Those are the people that are trying to save their own business. And,
but then
evil.
it's the hairdressers.
Yeah.
That was the big thing.
Those damn hairdressers.
So then
killing people.
Yeah. And what happened, what I thought was very telling to myself, and maybe this is me reading into it too much, but when they just announced this latest things to lockdowns for Alberta, and I'm curious how you guys do it in Lloyd, if Alberta and Saskatchewan have
we follow Saskatchewan's rules.
Okay.
It's a border town, and so they have to agree who they're going to follow. So we go by.
Can you switch?
You know what, legally, I don't know.
The Alberta
way I
one
understand is Lloydminster has its own special charter. So where they, as a municipality, when they came together as a corporation, they because half the town is on the Alberta side, half the town is on the Saskatchewan side. I think they agreed that they'd operate under Saskatchewan's laws and rules. I think.
Gotcha.
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Saskatchewan School and Saskatchewan Health.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me throw some at you though.
Alberta does have some.
I don't remember.
Throw what?
Well, Tanner mentioned we have different takes on things or different perspectives. I hope I'm not speaking for Tanner. Is that he thinks through everything is just get small and strong. Get your nearest 25 friends. Figure out who's gonna supply the cows, who's gonna fix the cars, who's gonna
become reliant.
Yeah, and for some reason I don't know why it's programmed into me. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Now I have 6 kids of my own. I think about the whole. I think about the family. I think about the city and the province, and the country. Less so about the country as I'm moving along. I was a pure, tried and true Canadian. And I'm starting to lean in other directions maybe. But anyways, I started thinking about it. Is media has been controlled by a very few for a very long period of time. And here we are stuck back in where there's a few key players that control Twitter, control Facebook, and we're right back to square one. But I started thinking about it, as I'm getting ready for your podcast, this is kind of a democratization of information. And you think about it, getting information to people and opinions to people. There's a couple of us in Lloydminster that, we're doing our thing. Sean Newman's doing his thing. You're up in Grand Prairie doing your thing. There's going to be 2 or 3 of you in Grand Prairie, 2 or 3 in Red Deer, 4 or 5 in Calgary, 4 or 5 in Edmonton. I wonder if you couldn't make a network of people who think alike, and maybe there's a shared message that gets to people that is out of Facebook's hands, is out of Twitter's hands, to where you can share ideas and opinions, because it's called the democratization of information for a reason. It's in our hands, not theirs.
I would argue it's already happened, Ken. Look down at Joe Rogan, what he created down there, and his network. He doesn't call it a network, but you can follow Joe Rogan and look down at that tree of all these podcasts and people that he gave their start to, and they think a lot of them think similarly, but then he also invites people on that think a little differently. But as long as they have that same underpinning, that same spirit that underpins them. And this is just my guess, but what I think is people that, and Tanner might not like this one, but people that lead with love and compassion. That's the biggest thing I see.
Poor Tanner.
I'm fucking
but I just think that is that one thing where so much of this and so much of this polarization, and people are just, whatever side of the matter you fall onto, if you're going to argue it in a mean-spirited way where you're yelling at the other side or calling them right, if you're on the right and you're calling the left snowflakes, if you're on the left and you're calling the right racists and bigots, that you in no way are trying to reach out and connect with them. That's never going to happen. You have to, as hard as it is, and as much as they don't, whatever other side to you, don't make it a nice thing to do, to keep that level head and to keep reaching across. If your actual goal is to find consensus and to unite people, that's the only way you can do it. And I feel like that is, as long as somebody is a really deep down a good person, that is what Joe Rogan's kind of,
he's got a cool vibe to him.
Yeah. And maybe that might be my guess of what that vibe is, but there's definitely something that underpins all those people that you look like that are under his branch. And that has democratized information so much, right? Like if you get on Rogan, you can now have that built-in audience that's going to come to you if you bring the goods, right? If you suck, it's a bit of a meritocracy. You have to bring the goods. You have to have a good podcast. You have to make it interesting. You have to make it something that some people want to come to. But I feel like that has taken away so much power. When you look at Joe Rogan and just his closest ones that have kind of started off of him, they are way bigger than any news network, right? All
until Spotify bought them.
Yeah.
Maybe that was an error in hindsight.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
I like the fact that they're like, I disagree with a network situation. I really do. I think that you can kill a network. It's hard to kill 50 individuals. Like
but
if you have a podcast and you have a podcast and I have a podcast and we all, like you hit the nail on the head with Spotify.
Yeah.
If we all operate under Spotify, then they can take out Spotify and take us all out.
Exactly.
Well, I was meaning more like not like they're under common ownership.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is decentralization.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think what I mean by that is that now we've sat and had a beer on a couch with Nick. And we're friends now. We're like separate countries.
Exactly.
But we have an alliance.
And that's what I was saying, because I agree. When you brought up network, I was going to say, like, I think it's already happening, but it's
happened, but
but it's done on
when you
each independent piece.
Look, when you see any I won't say any of the names, but you take there's a major mainstream media source that comes out of Canada and has been here for like a long time. If I see their name on something, it's fake. I cannot trust it. Now, for the first 38 years of my life, I wasn't like that. If I see something, I can even look in the States, and if I see something from Fox, it'll be right-wing pushing. They were a little bit left-wing right around the election, but then they went right-wing again. Now, if I look at something like CNN or what is it? What's the other one?
MSNBC.
Yeah. They're going to be very, very left-leaning. People are starting to get smart to that. So, like Jordan Peterson just talked about it a while back. I don't know. Talked about mainstream media is dying. It'll be gone.
It is.
You will no longer see mainstream media.
Why, do you think they're actually going to lose credibility?
Well, that's what the problem is too many people. I mean, half the population on each side won't listen to certain mainstream media outlets. Therefore, they just become a propaganda machine for whatever side they're talking to. Yeah. Okay. So they will eventually erode away, which is the democratization of media.
Which is too bad they're slitting their own throats.
It's just our problem is you only have, there is no, what did they used to say to me all the time when I get in trouble with the law? The law. There's your story, my story, and the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that there's, so if you listen to our podcast, you're going to get what we believe to be the truth.
Right.
Now, if I listen to, hipster snowflake podcast talking about your feelings and shit, you're going to hear about what they talk about.
Yeah.
And now, whatever you choose to adhere to, I think you are going to democratize information for sure. But I think it also gives people the opportunity to divide even more by doing that.
For sure.
Because there is no centralized network in which you can get an unbiased opinion. You're going to only get biased opinions, and it's going to stick a wedge right down the middle of this whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because okay.
Like you're saying that that everybody has their own bias. Therefore, if anybody that says anything, it'll create a wedge.
They're going to listen to what they want to hear.
Oh, like
which will further demonize the other side.
Right.
Therefore, like I said, like if I open up my social media, do that. And here's a little experiment I want to try: is go on your for the next 2 weeks or something. I don't know if I can do this out of my own sense of pride, but if you can go and just start Googling like climate change and like, man buns,
like feed the
and
algorithms,
skinny jeans and shit like that, and go Google all that shit all day long, all of a sudden your news feeds will start to tell you the other side. Right. And if you already have a man bun and skinny jeans and like to fucking draw pictures in the top of your coffee and stuff like that, then you can start Googling like jacked up trucks, like nuts on the back of your truck and, beards and shit like that. Yeah. And eventually you're going to get a right-wing media source. So these things are built to tell you what you want to hear, therefore giving you more and more and more confirmation bias the more you watch it. So we are going to lose mainstream media, which is awesome because they're so fucking corrupt. It's not even funny. But at the end of the day, we're also going to lose the ability to maybe look at the other side in any way, shape, or form. And I think you're going to buy into your side even more than ever, in my opinion.
And maybe just to add on to your argument of what you're saying, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong, kind of what I think you're saying is right now we have a real problem with echo chambers, and it's two really big echo chambers right now, and it's kind of pushing everybody to this side. But what you're saying is as those kind of fall down, everyone's going to find their smaller but equally as damaging echo chamber of exactly what they're into and just kind of stick into that. And that's what's going to stop them from not only are you only seeing this side and you're excluding 50% of the population, you're going to find that 5% that you really like and then operate in that and miss 95% of what's going on. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be educated we're getting farther and farther from the truth. The more
everybody has their own truth.
I don't know.
Those are interesting statements, but I wonder, let me push back for a moment, is in my heart, as you talk about, I'm the hope guy. I'm the positive
the light.
guy. I'm the light.
Yeah.
What feels right to me is that I don't want to argue with anybody over whether vaccinations work or don't work. What I can accept wholeheartedly is your situation the best. Your personal life and if you have a sick mom or dad or a healthy mom or dad or whatever you've got, man. And if you tell me you want to get the jab, I'm like, cool. Yeah. You must have had your reason. I accept you for that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Now let's go have a coffee. And if I say I'm not getting the jab, I just want you to say, cool. Did you want 2 creams or sugars in your coffee? What do you need? Yeah. That's about as deep as we need to go on this. This whole part where I can't be friends with you anymore because you are for and against, it's just wrong. And so
you're going to kill somebody's grandma. Like,
no, but
you're so irresponsible with your thinking, Ken.
But that seems
blood
right.
On your hands is just dripping off.
But we're 3 guys from the north who are here just being like, you like to eat deer and you like to eat elk. Okay, whatever. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
That makes sense to us. But we might be ignoring the fact that there's let's assume for a moment from our own bias that there is an agenda. They don't want what's right or wrong. They want us divided. They want to
exactly what I was going to bring up.
Now can we really play what feels right in my heart? It's like you got to pose this. Yeah. Like you got to pose it like now.
Right now. That's exactly what I was saying.
So now that's no longer I love everybody in the world. It's all going to be fine and dandy tomorrow morning. It might not be.
Yeah. Because kind of what that argument you were making there, Tanner, of these echo chambers kind of shrinking down, but the same problem existing. The way I see it is the same issue that we're having. I think it's not the echo chambers themselves, because that's going to be natural. I think that's just how things work and how life's just gotten so easy that you're not forced to just do what you need to do to survive. You have so much freedom and so much latitude to kind of find what you want and chase whatever that thing is. That might be trucks, that might be man buns, whatever that is. The issue to me is the permeability of that echo chamber. You need to be able to break out of those, and you need to be able to reach out. And even if this is your world, I feel like right now that's the issue, and we need to do that. And there's just 2 echo chambers, and I think that's slowly happening, kind of what you described. But I feel like the bigger issue is breaking out. But I think right at the end, you said something very important there. When everybody has their own truth, there's no universal truth. And that is something you guys are both Jordan Peterson guys I've heard from the podcast, and I'm a huge, I've just been reading all his stuff for a long. I used to listen to all his podcasts and stuff, but I'd never actually read his stuff. And I'm almost through his new book here, and I just read 12 Rules the week before, and I got ordered.
Oh, you just got through 12 Rules.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I just read, I've had it at my house forever, and I just didn't, I have so many books. I just always, after this one, I'll get to after this one, but I just, whatever it was, drew me into it. And his writing is so amazing. But I feel like what Jordan Peterson is really able to do is show the detriment to that statement there of when everybody has their own truth, and we are not only that, but now we're attacking 2 + 2 = 4, the scientific method, these types of things that our entire society is built upon and will really go wrong in a hurry if we lose that. That's what's dangerous. That's what we have to step up to right now. You can have your own feelings and stuff, but as soon as that enters the lab, into science, into physics, it's got to stop at the door, right? One of my biggest inspirations, Eric Weinstein, he's a mathematician and a physicist. He's been on Rogan. He has his own podcast as well. And that was what his argument was years ago, right? Him and his brother have been arguing this for years before it became mainstream. And they've been saying this, like, that's got to stop at the lab door. That was kind of what they were saying, is that can't enter science. There's physical truths that we need for things to work. And as soon as you start to attack that, that is where things fall off the hinges. And that's kind of what we're starting to see now, is there's such an attack on truth, and that the scientific method is racist. No, the scientific method is what's given us every major breakthrough that has gotten society to this point. It's the only reason we can feed this many people. It's the only reason we can keep society from, deteriorating into madness.
And it's one of those like things too, I've noticed, where I watch a lot of socialist people, say, let's say liberal minded people, that attack science by saying that's not science.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. By taking and attacking commonalities within things and saying, like we look at large mass of land to the south of us there, their government came in and said climate change is science, and basically if we attack this, we can change it. But scientifically, you see that climate change is repeatedly cyclical all over. Now is 8 billion people changing that? I would think so. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's like they say that we're going to attack this with science. No more. I mean, I take that as a direct shot towards a lot of, like some of the religious belief that a lot of this was country, like, and I'm not a religious guy by any means, but I think that a lot of our mindsets have been based upon a Christian mindset, just because of the way that people were when they first got here. But basically they're saying, stop listening to what you think is common knowledge, and we are going to provide you with the science that makes you do what we want you to do. And it's almost one of those things where they're saying, your science is bad science. We're going to do this with good science, which there you go. You've just destroyed any kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I have an argument all the time with a good friend of mine that I grew up with, and he's very liberal minded, scientific, if you want to call it. But it's some of the, what I was going to say to you too, is when you listen to like the Weinsteins and start, whatever they want to, Weinstein. Yeah. I've heard a couple of them talk. Science is weird because
it's ever changing.
It's ever changing. It's evolving. And the people that pay for science typically get what they want out of science. So if I want to prove something and I throw enough money at it, I will prove it. If I don't want something proved and I don't fund it, will it ever be proven? Because what science is based upon is a collective group of what we deem to be academic people deciding that if something happens enough times in a row put under a certain stress, then we can call that a scientific reality. But if you don't look at the other side of it, if you only try to prove one side, you've just created a truth, but you didn't look at the other piece. You know what I mean?
And that's not science. Science is
exactly.
People's definitions of science, it seems as of late, has really gotten out of whack. But science at its base is not going into it with an idea, come up with a hypothesis, have really strict rule sets for what you're coming up with, and seeing what comes out the other side. Not finding something you want to see and then creating an experiment to prove that. That's not science. That is actually the antithesis to science. That's the opposite, right? And that's one of those very important pieces too, that people, the way they're throwing science around lately, as if that means something settled. Like, if you understand science, it's never settled. They're always reproving and disproving.
The earth was flat one time, according to science.
Exactly. Like, the science is always ever changing. And it's so painful to hear people it's like they're standing behind this big shield called science, when just the way they're acting, the way they're throwing that word around proves to people that understand that they don't understand what science is, or even the definition of what science is. And you need to
challenge. The only way you challenge science is thinking outside the box of science. You know what I mean? Like, there is
and using that method to test your ideas,
and then using experience and stuff like that upon it. Like, it's weird how we do that. Like,
and there's bias in science too. Like, Nick,
sure.
I was listening to your podcast this morning, but you didn't mention it. But I like what you're doing, where you're just trying to have an honest conversation with yourself about each of these topics and saying, okay, masks. Everybody says one works, or they don't work, or they do work. But how many people have actually read up on the science of it, right? And I agree with you on the science. To me, science right now is, for the layperson, is I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I have my opinion, and you're opposing my opinion. So I'm going to try to make you feel stupid by saying, well, I'm just going to follow the science. Thank you very much. Yeah. Which means the science is mine. The science is not yours. Yeah. So you're obviously stupid and I'm obviously smart, but I actually can't even spell the word science, right? Yeah. But I'm claiming it as mine. And so you're stupid. But the other thing is I'm sorry, I can't quote the research, but I've read on it before, is that there's a lot of bias in science, right? Because who's funding the science, right? And if you're in academia, guess what? You like to get paid. You like to get another grant, right? And if it kind of comes out a certain way, well, you might get a second grant. There's going to be bias within that. And have you ever read on that, Nick? I have not. I can't quote the study, but I think if we thought there was no bias within science, we'd be naive.
Yeah, and when you look at people like, and just to bring them up again, I mean, bring them up on almost every podcast, but Eric Weinstein and his brother Brett and his wife Heather, they're all very much within that world of academia, and they show you the just absolute innate corruption throughout. Academia is one of the most corrupt places of all time. So then to know that and to have seen it, I went to university. I got to see what it was. I went for 4 years not long ago, right? And I got to see the belly of the beast inside that of what is going on there and the brainwashing and all this stuff that's happening. And it's very true, right? And you want to say that science isn't biased? There's some questions you got to ask. And I think what you brought up, and that's, I don't know how much I cover it. Again, this is the worst part of the podcast, is as soon as I hit stop record, I forget everything I said. I have no idea what I said on the mic. I can never remember. But in terms of the masks, one of the biggest issues I see is that there's people saying, hey, I read a study, masks do work. I've read a study that masks don't work. There is hundreds of studies saying all these different things, all these different effects of what these masks are, and they're all funded by different people. They're all trying to get different results. So any person can go and say, masks do work or don't work, whatever their argument is, whatever side they're on, and say, and here's the study to back it up. So now you have to do, so then at that point, now you can't rely on that. So now you have to go to some other things. So that's what I did. So what I looked at was, okay, I'm looking at this, looking at the math and the arguments that the people that are saying masks don't work make, the arguments that the people that are saying do masks work, and how does that work? And then trying to understand from there what pieces there are. And before this whole pandemic and this whole idea of masks got politicized, go back before that. Everybody knows where they've seen masks before, right? Usually people from across the pond, right? Asian countries, because they've dealt with,
communism,
avian flu, that too. But like these avian flus, these respiratory diseases, these respiratory viruses, and they've found ways to handle them. Masks are not a magic bullet. They're not, or silver bullet. That's what I think. Magic bullet is the, I think magic bullet is the blender. But
I think part of it was also, I don't know this for sure, but I've been to a few of those Asian countries, and I have a friend from South Korea, and I asked him, because I've been to a few of them, and anyways, I was like, why does everybody wear masks over there? Is it for sickness? Polite. You know what he said is pollution, particles in the air, right? Because a lot of industry in China would blow the particles. And he would say that it was to stop the particles. So it might not have been for a virus or a bacteria. I don't know that for sure. But that's what he told me.
No, and I think that is big. And I think that's especially big in China because of the pollution problem they have there. But then when you look at Japan, and when you ask somebody from Japan, okay, before all this stuff and it all got politicized, before that, why were you wearing masks? And a lot of the arguments they say is just the culture that they have is so polite. And so that if you have any sort of sniffles, they don't know if masks are going to stop it or anything, but at least they're just so polite. They would much rather just wear that when they're out if they feel some sort of down. That's just the politeness of their culture. And that's why they did it. And that makes a lot of sense to me when you understand Japan and what goes on there. And that makes an argument too. I don't think that says much about whether masks work or not, because that could just be whether they work or not. If you think it does, you're going to be polite. That's going to follow the same things regardless if they work or not. But to me, that's where I fall in the argument, right? Like, I don't think masks are as... I feel like, to me, and this is again just my conjecture, and this might be my tinfoil hat on here, but I feel like masks were one of those things where there was so much worse shit going on, so much of our liberties and our freedoms being taken that they didn't want people to speak up about and really fight about, that they got everyone fired up over masks, and they got everyone fighting over masks, because masks is the least of the restriction. Like, really, my freedoms, like the tracking apps, the vaccine passports, those are the things that really scare me. Throwing people in hotels, that shit scares me.
Universal basic income.
But
so you finish what you're going to say, and then I have a take on this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my only take with that is that I feel like masks have just been this issue that everybody's inflated to get people fighting over something else because there's things that we really should be fighting over and standing up to, but we're so busy fighting over masks that we're not looking at the real things that are happening. That's my take on it.
It's a smokescreen.
Right? And it's
COVID's a smokescreen.
And it very well could be.
I talked to Kenny about this. They passed universal basic income the other day.
Or a liberal party.
Yeah, to put it into legislation, and it wasn't even in the news.
Mm. Wow.
Why? Because COVID.
Yeah, and I think
this isn't the first time people have, got you looking at the left hand while they were playing games with the right. This isn't new. This isn't a new game. It's new to an uneducated,
somebody that hasn't read any history.
If you bury yourself in fucking Fortnite and porn for 19, 20 hours a day, you're probably going to fall for a lot of stupid shit. And I think we are.
Yeah.
Like people don't really like education anymore. They like being told what to do and make sure they can still do the things that make them happy.
Right.
So, this isn't the first time this has happened.
And I do think you stumbled onto something, because I think there's very much two types of people throughout this whole thing. The ones that want the information and the ones that just want to go along with whatever information is given. And I think that's a scary thing. And I feel like it feels like, because the response and what they're going with, all the policies going off of the reaction of the people that have just been going along, just eating the stuff that's fed to them. Right. And that's the people. And I feel like that makes it feel like that is the predominant message. But my pushback to that is that they also make it seem like everybody's listening to the news down in the States, and that's the big turning point. But Joe Rogan gets way more people than that. And that's the people that those are the type of people that want that information, that want to learn, right? Maybe they're not good readers. Maybe that's why they've taken their information from podcasts, which is, as I started podcasting, that's the biggest thing that people have said is just, Andrew said it this morning. He said, I always thought I was stupid growing up because I wasn't a very strong reader. And that put that narrative in my head that I was stupid. Cool. And then I found podcasts and I started, and I told him, I said, I never had that narrative because I was always, a pretty bright kid, and I got through school pretty easy. And I was just blessed that my parents really busted ass when I was little, and when I was like 3 years old, they had flashcards over my wall and stuff. So I'm an amazing reader. I read through shit like nothing. But even me, with all that being said, when I graduated university and found podcasting, I started learning shit at such a rate I didn't even know it was possible. I couldn't believe how much I was learning. And I was starting to crank it up and listen to it at 2 times speed, 2.5 times, 3 times speed. Now I'm just taking this information at these rapid, and I'm enjoying it so much that it's sticking, and I'm taking it forward, and I'm bringing it into conversations, and I'm learning. And then I couldn't get enough, right? And I started with the Joe Rogans, and then I started going down history of the guests he'd have on. I found all these people, and then from their trees of who these guests had on, and now I have this whole network of people, and I've learned so much from them. They've given so much to me that was a huge impetus to why I wanted to do this. I want to give back that small piece. Maybe it takes me doing 500 episodes to get to one person where it impacts them and makes a difference in their life.
It's interesting as you're talking. I think that would be a lot of the podcasts have blown up.
Yeah.
Now we can all dial into a researcher, anybody we want to listen to and figure out from, and gain a perspective on something. So you probably have to argue that on the whole, we're becoming much more knowledgeable at a very increasing rate. However, it appears that we're also becoming very stupid.
Yeah.
So two things are moving in opposite directions. Mm-hmm. Our knowledge level is going up, but we're acting stupider.
And we're acting less too.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Like I see.
I'm making a blanket statement here. I understand.
It's unlike you. Ken.
Yeah, no, I
should have came in with the. But
can't
Ken,
paint
what
everybody
about
with
one guy that came in and one time did this one thing?
My biased opinion is that because here's a question for you. And Nick, you're the interviewer. We did one with Sean Newman here not too long ago.
Yeah, I listened to that.
And he's like, Ken, you realize you're doing a podcast with a podcaster. So let me throw something back at you. At all of us is. Well, can I ask? Do you mind if I ask 2 questions?
Give her, man. Give her. I love it.
Your prediction: where are we 5 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
Would be one. The second one is if what we're saying we believe that there's a lot more to this than COVID infections. That there are families losing homes. There are children calling helplines with suicide intentions. We are losing years of education for kids, sports. It's wreaking havoc, mental health. Those are heavy loads that society's taking. And in 5 years, what have each of us done about it?
Right.
I posed this question on Sean Newman's podcast, Somebody came up to me and said, don't be so hard on yourself, Ken. You are doing something. You're talking about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sure. But we're still on full force here. And, we're in a community of 35,000 people here. There's kids that are in trouble here tonight. And I'm sitting here drinking on a $4 beer and sitting on a nice comfy leather couch.
Yeah, but that's not your fucking problem.
You think?
No, it's not.
See, I think that's maybe where we always come apart.
Yeah, that's where.
What do you think, Nick?
And I feel like I'm in the middle of it. I feel like I can see that argument that there is more to be done, but I feel like compared to the mean of what, if you take everybody that feels that way, because I feel when you mentioned earlier that I haven't found one person that agrees with this that I've talked to in person. I feel like on social media I've seen it, but in real life when I talk to anybody, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm sick of this, right? Everybody just says, every single person to a T. I haven't run into one person that has said otherwise.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
This is the best fucking year of my life.
Yeah.
By 10 times.
Yeah.
10 times. It's
all what you make it.
But you think there's going to be tanks in the streets in a month?
There will be.
Why is that the best year of your life, though?
Because
you're prepared.
We have an enemy. I've been waiting my whole fucking life for this. This is awesome. I'm 40 now. For 39 years, I sat back and just watched a bunch of fucking pussies sit there and talk about the weather. And it's like, this to me was always like, I hate this. Mm-hmm. I hate this. I used to, I couldn't stand it. And now, you know what? We're probably facing imminent doom. I think so. I really do. And I mean, you can do your prediction.
Just define imminent doom.
So,
give us a year.
Well, I mean, like I said, we'll probably have military in the streets by the end of the summer because the people won't stand for this any longer, right? So, I'm going to tell you what my take is on that. To put it, so we talk about freedoms, right, all the time, and I think I said this to you the other day, and you thought about it, then you didn't like it, and we kind of went.
Which one was that?
Well, I said everybody right now is saying our freedoms have been taken away, our rights are being taken away. That's like the cool thing to say. I have a different mindset. I mean, I've grown a lot through that. Maybe I've digressed. I don't know. I've changed throughout this whole process. And I think maybe that's what I like the most about it is this is the first time in my life where I could sit and strategize against something that mattered, because it's like, okay, how the fuck do we beat this? Right. And it's not like, in answering that, you're going to say, how does it beat us? Because how it beats you is how you beat it typically. Right. Kenny and I both train MMA. We train with Andrew. He's a little more experienced than we are, sure. But at the end of the day, to understand how something's going to beat you is how you will understand how to beat it, right? Like we talk about
as
MMA.
long as you're playing by the same rules, because that works in MMA.
So you look at an MMA thing and you look at like Khabib, right? In order to beat him, you're going to have to understand how he beats you better than he understands how to beat you.
And the only way to do that is to hop in a time machine 20 years ago and start fucking wrestling from that with bears,
what you just did is segued into what I was going to say perfectly. You can't beat Khabib because Khabib's experience and history just will not allow you to beat him, because you can't get ahead of what he already knows how to do.
Right.
Does that make sense? So if we look at what's happening right now with the rights and freedoms things to start with, is we think we have rights and freedoms. That's what we think. We've been given this beautiful facade of rights and freedoms. And Kenny and I have talked lots about this, and I've kind of changed my stance on it a little bit, because I was all for it. I did a monologue on a podcast, I think about number 6 or 7, something like that. It's called Lessons from the Darkness, I think is what it was. And I did this monologue saying, we can't give up our freedoms, right? And I'm always like, I'm the first guy to say that I may say something that's completely wrong, and I will change my tune on it usually if I'm wrong. And I think on that I was a little bit wrong, because I was learning, or not learning, I was falling into the trap of thinking that we have freedoms. But I have a cell phone sitting here. We all own a cell phone, right? Do you own that cell phone, and do you own the network and the data in which it operates? No?
No.
Okay. You guys each have a mortgage? I don't know. Is your house paid for? A mortgage? Yeah. Do you have at least one vehicle that's maybe financed or have some sort of insurance on it that is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So all those things, those are just three things that are providing you with life, let's say.
And freedoms, yeah.
Yeah,
you
freedoms.
Can't get around if you don't got a truck.
So those aren't your fucking freedoms. Those can be taken away from you at any given second. Those are handouts that corporate government entities have allowed you to have. Your house, you couldn't have went and bought a $350,000 or a $300,000 house without some sort of corporate government entity giving you that. But yet you will fight to the death because that is your house and that is your freedom. No, it's not. Your freedoms are leased or rented at best. And I tell this story lots about the day that I went up and decided that I was going to let my freedoms that I fight so strongly for go away. And I went up into the bush that went right before Christmas. That's the freest a human is ever going to be. Mm-hmm. I had a knife, an axe, some matches, and a tarp. And a storm blew in. I mean, if you can listen to the podcast, it's on there, but I'll just say it in case nobody here has heard it. And I went in there and I built a little shelter, had limited time. It was like the 18th, so just about the darkest you're going to get. Anyway, damn near fucking died. I got a storm blew in, got mild hypothermia, managed to get myself out. It snowed, just about fucking died. Well, I was free. But guess what? In having true freedom, I damn near fucking died. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have the power company to heat me up. I didn't have the water company to hydrate me. I didn't have a grocery store to provide me with food. I didn't have a bank to buy me a vehicle. I didn't have any of those things. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting here saying our rights and freedoms need to be protected. You don't have any rights or fucking freedoms. And if you did have true freedom, most of the motherfuckers would be dead in a week. If you had true fucking freedom, you wouldn't last a week. You might, because you guys are, but I can take somebody from downtown Vancouver and make them free, and they're probably fucking wolf shit in about 2 weeks. Yeah. Right? So my thing is we're fighting for something that we don't even have. Yeah. And if we did have it, we wouldn't last fucking 10 minutes because we'd run back and say, where's my fucking Wi-Fi? Yeah. And we talk about podcasts and stuff like that. And it's crazy because I love these fucking things. Yeah. I hate the empire, but fuck, do I love what it provides me? Yeah. You know what I mean? I get free information, Mm-hmm. You fucking, you used to have to be good at stuff to see a girl's boobs. Now you just fucking Google it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's crazy how we think we're so fucking entitled, and we're like, I deserve to not wear a mask. Then don't fucking wear one. Like I said.
But do you think, Tanner, like this, obviously you can see we're doing it right now, is, I'm going to shut up for a minute. What do you think, Nick?
I have a ton to say on that. And I feel like one of the biggest things I got out of that whole speech there is a lot of these talks about rights and freedoms. It's all how you define it, right? And where you define it, where you draw the line at. And I feel like I actually was talking about this with Andrew this morning. I feel like what people are so out of touch with is how the whole system works economically, societally, and what everything's based off of. And when you look at it, a lot of it is based off of violence. The society is structured in this way. And if you don't do these things, right, people know the very plain instances of violence, right? If you don't follow the rules, you'll go to jail. Right. But then some people say, oh, well, there's certain rules you break and you only get fined. So what happens if you don't pay that fine? You go to jail. What if you refuse to go to jail? The enforcing of the violence. The entire system is based off of violence, right? And a monopolization of violence. And that's what keeps everything safe. And now you have a whole society where violence used to be innate with society. That was hand in hand. You were very aware of violence and hardship for the past, until about 30 years ago, probably, And now people are so out of touch with violence. And that doesn't mean to say, and this is what I was talking about, Andrew, I said, like, there's so many fighters that I actually made the point. I think I said, Justin Gaethje, one of the most violent men on this earth, doesn't, maybe intellectually understand all the underpinnings and how violence interacts with all the society and stuff. But that relationship, his relationship with violence has him understand it in a way where now all those other things, he has a little bit better understanding of it. And I feel like our entire society is so far removed from that. And not even interpersonal violence, just the violence of trying to survive out with real freedom, right? That is violence in itself, right?
Well, that's about as
life,
violent as it gets. Yeah.
Life is violent, right? And I feel like we have so fallen out of touch with that. We have this, that's where that entitlement creeps in, and now we're entitled to all these things because we so misunderstand what everything is really based off of, right? And
strife. Life is strife.
Life is strife, and life is suffering at a certain point, and that's where Peterson and Sam Harrison, a lot of these people talk about. That is true, and suffering is a part of us, but needless suffering and creating suffering when we could avoid it is what hell is, right? To him, in his understanding, and that's something to everybody. And I really truly believe that. And I feel like that's where I have such a strong pushback, a strong gut feeling that this isn't right now, because I see through the decisions that are being made, some needless suffering for our kids, for our people locked at home, the mental health. I feel like there's suffering that we could be making better decisions with how we handle this. It doesn't mean we have to go full Florida, open everything up and make everybody, whatever. I think there's probably some arguments to that too, but I'm not even saying that's the thing we need to take it to. But there's small incremental changes we could do to handle this better that would cut out so much needless suffering. But because of the systems and how they're set up, we're not incentivized to. There's no incentives. And I feel like that's where I wanted to go back to, just to answer your question of kind of where I see this going. I feel like this is what was so exciting about getting to sit down with you guys, because I see so much of myself in both of you guys. And I feel like I am so in line with what Tanner's saying. We just get there a little differently. Where Tanner, I feel like, and again, stop me if I'm wrong, or if I'm putting words in your mouth, I don't want to. I feel like where I see the same outcomes, I see them just because of misincentives. And I see it economically. And these things are obviously naturally happening. It's not bad people that are creating them. This is just the natural progression if you lay things out this way, right? So, and when you say there's going to be tanks in the street, I don't think there'll ever be tanks in the street for a couple reasons. If shit gets to the point where we need tanks are outdated 50 years ago. Right?
Military units. There'll be military personnel.
But where
tanks are like 1940.
Exactly, right? Because if shit ever got to that point, this is something that's really scary to me, is there will never be a war on the scale that we think of real war at ever again. It's going to be, I think, if it would happen tomorrow.
Biological.
That's what I'm saying. Or what if it's
drones?
Look at what if it's a disease? You bring up these things. Why not fucking drop an EMP and take out your whole power grid on one side of the whole United States and Canada? Yeah. That is what it's going to be. Or you see all these cyber attacks, when you really look at it, of what's happening right now, these undercover cyber attacks that don't get publicized, right? Like America and Canada has both been hit with amazingly damaging cyber attacks before, just to prove they can do it. But they don't blow it up. They don't put it into the news because you don't want to admit that you're behind, right? That you're vulnerable, and it's happening. That's where I see that going, and that is way scary. I'm way more scared of that.
Attacking your comfort,
right? And
what they're actually doing.
And what when in a world of people spending 20 hours a day on the porn and Fortnite, where do you think you're going to attack? You attack what they love, right? You go after what those things are and what makes.
It's called leverage,
right? Leverage, exactly. But that's the one point. But that's I think a whole different discussion, right? Yeah. But just to say, it's not tanks, but just troops in the street to enforce these regulations. I don't see that either, because I don't see it as this nefarious game that they're playing, where I feel like, which is a very natural instinct. And I have a lot of compassion for these people, where I see there's not enough compassion for this, is the people that say this is all a hoax and they're just trying to do this. There's an evil cabal that's trying to get things out of it, right? I feel like it's damaging just to write those people off, because there's some, if you talk to those people and ask why they think that way, they've got some real merit to their arguments, right? There's some real meat on the bone there. But to me, where I go is, yes, I agree, but I think it just is happening different. I don't think it's a bunch of evil people planning all this. I think it's a system that is developed where the incentives, because of how this is all structured and how big business and corporations are now at the helm, they're the ones calling all these shots and doing what's good for them. When you look at what happens, right? Like, who came out of this the best? The Amazons, the Walmarts of the world. They're the ones that come out of this the best, but also who's making the decisions at the end? Who's funding all these politicians that are making these regulations, right? Having said that, the only reason that works is because nobody stands up. And the more, I was actually making this point earlier and I kind of got sidetracked, but the hairdresser thing. So when they just put this most recent round of lockdowns in, my girlfriend, Alyssa, you guys just met her. She goes, "Oh man, I hope I can get a haircut. I meant to get one, but I just kind of thought we were out of it, so it wasn't putting much pressure on it." And I go, they're putting all these lockdowns in place. I said, "Guaranteed it won't be hairdressers." She goes, "Well, how do you know they're locking down everything? We can't even go for supper." I said, "No, because hairdressers already stood up. In the first couple lockdowns, at that one point when all the hairdressers said, no, we're opening up, right? I think that was maybe just an Alberta thing. I said, they will never lock them down again because they've already proved they're not listening to this. They're not going to take it. And sure enough, when they lock down, I'll put all these regulations and close down gyms and all these dumb shit, hairdressers were nowhere to be found. They were free to go. I think all that takes is now we're starting to see gyms do it. They'll never try to lock down gyms again after they've seen that they're going to stand up to it. That's all it takes. And I feel like they're trying to push and push and push. And the more that we push back, I feel like that is a natural response. If you think that this is nefarious and there's people at the front, they're just going to hold back to it. And they're not going to, even if every person in Canada stood up and said no, if it's nefarious, that's when they send in the troops. But if I'm correct, and this is just misincentives with the system, kind of how the natural playing out of the system we've created with, you know, money at the top and power at the top and just do whatever, even if it hurts people, then now as more people rise up, more people step back, that changes the incentives. Now they're not only just beholden to case numbers. Now they're beholden to other things that is up to us to tell them what we value. No, we value our kids, right? Like, Ken, you say you're worried about those kids at home calling those helplines. We value that too. The more people that bring that up, I feel like that's what's going to push back. And I feel like what is so unfortunate when you look at the Canadian response and the American response, in America, because of the way they have their states set up, there's now different examples. And you can point, I'm in California, I'm locked down. Well, look at over in Texas, a couple 100 miles that way. They got no regulations. They're doing better.
That's the way the United States was built.
Right, exactly.
That's
beautiful.
It's
beautiful.
how democracy was created, is through, like, the reason why democracy worked originally was through city states.
100%.
Right? So they built the United States of America, which means you have 50 different permutations. Well, at the time it was only 13.
13, I think, yeah.
But you had 13 different permutations of ideology that you could go follow, and if you didn't like it, you went to the next one.
Yeah. And you could find the one that, just like we talked about earlier,
which is
that
fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's a great idea,
Right?
and it works amazingly. And actually, Jordan Peterson just had a senator on his podcast. I just listened to it on the way up, and it was amazing them talking about that. And they're talking about this exact thing. It's funny that it comes up like this because they were talking about that exact thing of how that should work and the benefits to having that, and to have the different the different states trying. And what the senator was saying is that is how, like you say, when it was 13 colleges, that's how these things happen, and it gave that freedom. And then they kept taking, and it was based off this principle of whatever regulation needs to be done by government needs to be done by the smallest, the most.
Said that?
I think, I can't remember if it was Jordan or if it was the senator.
But it goes back to like old original
just to maintain
US
ideology amongst
right,
geographic,
like John Locke or
and he was talking about how all this power has just been pulled up, right? It used to be in the state, and now it's going to federal, now it's going to the executive, right? And they just keep pulling these powers upwards, which really takes away all that power that we just talked about, that amazing system that it has, right? It's almost like a minimum force, right? Everybody knows the idea of minimum force. Like
if you're going to take humans' rights, it's the least amount you
right. And it was a similar idea, but in localization, right? If you need certain things, certain aspects from the government, it needs to be enforced by the most local governmental level that can handle the scope of what that was. But what they said is that at each level, they kept abdicating their own personal responsibility. So now that guy at the state level, I don't want to deal with this shit. I'm just going to change the rules so that I push the shit up the hill, make this guy do it.
Hand over power.
Right. Hand over power, put it up, push it up, push it up. And now it has so bloated the executive and the Congress and all that now no decisions can be made at the state level. They're so handcuffed, and the entire system was built upon giving freedom to those state levels and letting them work through these things on their own. Right. And I feel like there's so much power in that and so much beauty to that system. And I think we all can see that at that base level. And sure, it's more complicated than that. There's a whole bunch of things that go into it, but I just love that idea of that localization, bring the power back down, because where you want the power is in the people. And the closer you are to the people, you want the people making you want the person making the decisions for the people to be as close to you. You want it to be that guy that you know down the street. You want to know that they have their best interest. Every level that moves away from you is power moving away from the people and into a couple people. And that is just, it's the opposite of decentralization. It's very worrying. And then you take that to the next levels and you add in some of the other things we talked about, like media and all these other things. And you've seen the same thing happen over and over. And there's more beers in the fridge there, boys. We need to grab more.
It's interesting. There's just so many thoughts that are coming to my head.
Yeah.
One of them is you're talking about how everything's getting pushed up. And I believe in local government as much as you can.
Yep.
And it's why, funny, I've been coaching a lot of senior hockey. I don't coach it anymore, but every single night when they'd sing the national anthem.
Yeah.
I'd sit on that bench, and one of the things I liked the most is singing "O Canada."
Yeah.
And I'd stare at the O Canada flag, or at the Canadian flag, and I'd almost get a tear welling up as I thought about people dying for that flag and for what I think we stood for. And then going through everything our country's been going through, it was hard for me to jump the fence and go towards anything that was against the flag or against Canada. And then I started thinking about it, is like, I'm from a big family, as I mentioned. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I have 6 kids of my own again. And then it kind of hit me one day when I'm sitting on that bench looking at the Canadian flag going, if I ever say I'm for decentralization, I'm not speaking against the flag. I'm not speaking against the fine women and men and women that have died for our country or for other free countries. It's okay to be different. Mm-hmm. It's just totally okay to be different.
That's what they're fighting for, is your ability to be different.
Yeah, isn't it? And so if Quebec wants certain rights and they want this and they want that, cool. Mm-hmm. If Ontario wants universal basic income and they want to lock down their borders, and that's truly what the people want, cool.
Go for it.
And so then I started thinking, well, I'm not a separatist, but I'm cool for autonomy. I'm really cool that what works in Alberta, let the Albertans be the way they want to be. And Saskatchewan wants to, whatever. And I'm moving away from this nationalist, if you speak out against Canada, you're speaking out against the flag. I'm moving away from that. I'm for decentralization. I'm for local decisions, local government. Mm-hmm. We're all different. That's okay. Yeah. And what makes us beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's something where, like I talk about it, where I kind of started that whole argument from the States and how they had set it up. And I feel like you take that up to Canada and we have even less of that, right? Where our provinces are bigger, harder to handle, right? Like they're more spread out. It's harder to govern, right? You look at New York State and the size of it, right? Like that's one thing and you can govern that in a certain way. But now you look at Alberta or Ontario for that matter, it's a little bit of a different state. Also started different constitution, different rights. And then we have that, same issue. So now America started with really strong local governance, right? State rights, all that stuff. And it has gotten pulled up. And over the time it's gotten worse. Canada started already kind of halfway to where they're at now, and then has had the same problem, and these powers have been sucked up. So now you look at least in the States, they're still at a point where the states are free enough to try different things, right? Whereas the fact that you look at, if you wanted to give a Florida or a Texas of Canada, of the ones being the least of the regulations, it'd be Alberta. And even us, we're doing almost the exact same thing as everyone else. There's nobody trying something new. There's 13 provinces and territories all doing the same strategy that was decided a week after we entered the pandemic.
Do you find it as an Albertan, we're Saskatchewanites, but I think we're one and the same.
Yeah.
Are you kind of disappointed? I'm like, I thought we were stronger than this.
For sure.
I thought that we were. Did, eh? I did. Yeah, we're cowboys and.
But this is
you
where.
Think so?
Maybe the cities are waiting us.
They're
but I gotta say, in Lloydminster,
drive into Edmonton and tell you.
Driving to
tell
Lloydminster,
me if you think we're tough.
And tell me how many people are standing up
Edmonton.
and taking one for the team and saying, "I'll risk my job. I'll risk my career for this."
Right.
Very few, if any. I'm disappointed in myself. I really am.
Yeah. But I think you also hold yourself to a higher standard than all these other people, so you can be disappointed.
Well, you
yourself.
have a standard.
Exactly.
That
I think there's a lot
created.
of people that.
They have a standard that was downloaded into their fucking minds because they're weak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
weak
that's
people
very true.
congregate towards more weak people.
But do you think there's average Lloydminster rate? I mean, average. Let's say one side is strong, one side is weak. Mm-hmm. How are we define that? What percent are strong? What percent are weak?
Well, I mean, and a friend of mine posed this question to me too. He said it's the weak that's the problem, and he goes, well, define what weak is. It's a good question. Right?
I wonder if that's a correct statement.
What?
The weak. Do you think the weak are the problem?
Yeah.
I think it's. I think it's the system, because this is.
But the system is weakening people.
That's what I'm saying.
So I mean, but that's just it. It's your fucking decision to be weak.
Mm-hmm. But that was going to be my response to Ken saying
there needs to be personal accountability,
100%
on whether or not you're fucking weak or not.
Right.
And if you can look in the mirror and justify all your little imperfections and shit, you're a fucking pussy, and go fix them.
Right.
So that you don't become part of the meat grinder that's coming. Mm-hmm. But that's what we're all going to do.
Right.
And
what I was thinking too is when you're saying that, and I look at that, because I do think that Alberta on the whole is, if you want to look at strong and weak, like if you however you wanted to define that, I think you're going to find a higher percentage in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I think of the entire, and I think once you get out into the Maritimes, I think there's probably some pretty high numbers there. Again, just pulling all this numbers out of my ass of what I feel, right? Yeah. But I think on the whole, when you look at it as, look at all of Canada or all of North America, or all of the world, the way life has gotten so easy that it's natural. These systems are created to they're not created to weaken us, but just a byproduct of them is that they weaken us. So I think on the whole, in the last 50 years, just humanity has gotten weaker. Or we think, and again, I don't even think it's weakness, because this is another point I want to bring up when you talk about going out into the bush. We have thousands and thousands of years of evolution and living some harsh lives, and the capability of what is inside us is so much greater, and that's what gives me hope. You know, like I feel like I'm always the eternal optimist, and that's what gives me hope, right? The amount of people that listen to Joe Rogan gives me hope. The amount of, like, when you read about the explorers that first went down to the Arctic and you see what the human body is capable of, right? When you look at Wim Hof, like these guys, like there's so much you can push, and there's not, the society is made so that you never have to test those limits.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is a question that I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Okay, so this is my problem with optimists. So Kenny and I have this dynamic. And maybe I should ask you this too. So what happens if you're an eternal optimist?
Yeah.
Is that what I say? Is that
Yeah.
And somebody squashes your hope. Now what?
It depends where that hope comes from. Is it squashable?
So say you've sold yourself on this utopian idea that we get out of this, okay? And you know, and you're gonna save your. Kenny's got 1,400 kids, so imagine like, and I hate to go down this road, but I'm gonna. And that is okay. So what happens when you do everything to save your children, and then they kill them all? Or what happens when you have this eternal optimistic hope that things are going to get better, and then all of a sudden it gets squashed and they're not going to get better? Then what do we do? I mean,
can I throw it at you?
Yeah, but I'm asking you this question because this is the problem.
I might not make it.
Yep.
But now Alexander Solzhenitsyn will. Mm-hmm. Right? You come out of the Gulag archipelagos. Mm-hmm. Like Nick might get tortured, and I might die of starvation. Yep. And Viktor Frankl might come out of the camp, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn might come out of the torture chambers. Mm-hmm. Humans will survive.
Yeah,
humans will survive. We are very, everything that lives is a beautiful. You get into biology, you know, like it's just cool that you know, I shouldn't say everything because there have been species that have been wiped out. But I think that we'll find a way to survive it. There's no guarantee that it's me and my families might get all wiped out. It might not be you. But somebody will.
Yeah. And that's where I'm optimistic in different ways. And I feel like it's a very important part of where that optimism comes from. And I think that is where it's squashable. And I think a lot of people that are optimists, a lot of it comes down to faith, whether that's religious faith or just faith in something bigger, faith in the unknowable. And where I don't think things are going to get better. I think the way we have systems set up and they're so entrenched that I don't see a real solution to this. I feel like there's certain ways to make it so that you can work through them. I think there's really amazing things that we see that are pulling back and knocking those systems down and really sweeping the leg on them, right? And I think Joe Rogan's at the head of that pack of just free information, free thinkers, getting shown that there's ways to do this, right? That if you want to do something, if you're passionate about something, you can chase it. And that gives me optimism. But on the whole, I'm not optimistic. What worries me, I listen to a podcast. I don't know if you guys are Dan Carlin fans.
Huge. Oh, yeah.
Oh, so Dan Carlin, I listened to, what's that one called? He did one on the Cuban Missile Crisis. And just how close society came to being gone. Like everybody on the American side, all his cabinet. Anyway, right. Like you say, someone will survive. We'll make it through. Like the human race has gotten down to 2,000 to 10,000 people before.
Was that?
I think it was Countdown to Armageddon.
Countdown started in World War I.
That's World War I. Yeah.
Armageddon's
yeah. You're right.
Which is also World War I.
Countdown to Armageddon is the World War I.
Okay, keep talking. I'll think of it.
Which is my ultimate favorite Dan Carlin.
Armageddon.
Yeah. Countdown to Armageddon.
Archduke Ferdinand.
Oh my God,
so
good.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh,
for people to listen to this, if you like history, go to Dan Carlin.
Oh, go to Dan Carlin. Yeah, he is amazing.
Well, because it gives you both sides.
Yeah,
that's what I've always loved. Like, and I mean, when I pose that question to you guys, it's in no way trying to drag you, but my question is always, are you fucking prepared for bad things to happen?
Right.
You know, and that's what I always worry about with people that are too optimistic.
They're not ready.
It's like, man, I've been optimistic before, and you start to not look at your flanks when you become too optimistic, right? Because happiness will happen if you work hard enough.
Right.
But if you just sit there expecting it, a lot of people get into some trouble with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I said, like we just did a podcast with a girl on depression, right? And I got to talk to somebody about this podcast after, and I said, can you be, is there more depression in Alberta than there is in, say, like parts of like the Congo, let's say?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's just say that. So say you have a nice group of people that have been living a certain way, and I'm not a fucking geologist. Maybe that's somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Northern Africa. No, it's whatever. Let's just say that there's a group of people out there that have things 100 times worse than somebody in Alberta. In Alberta, you're depressed because you have to turn your $80,000 truck back into the dealership. And now I'm depressed. So what I'd like is one of the things, it's like, is depression a byproduct of entitlement? Right? I'm entitled to feel this way. I no longer feel this way. Now I feel sorry for myself. And then you go to somebody that's, wiping their ass with a fucking thorn bush saying like, life's good.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always ask, like, are we ready to go backwards?
Right. And I would
That's
argue
always
that
the question is because we probably will. And are we prepared to go backwards? Because you're going to see a lot of people put bullets in their heads because they're going backwards.
Right.
But a lot of people will, like when you read those nasty books, right, on the treacherous times in history, we're just like a mouse. We'll do everything we can to survive.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll chew on that rubber if
we might even justify our oppression to make it feel better.
Sure. So humans will survive. Until the sun goes out.
Right.
Or
and that's where I was trying to take that is that scared the shit out of me. Listen to that, how close we came and how close we are at all times of nuclear fallout. But and now that's the big one because everyone understands that one. Everybody sees that one. But like we talked about earlier, we've escalated so much further. There's bioweapons. We have so many weapons at our disposal that could be absolutely devastating to everything and such terrible systems to wield them. Right. And that is scary to me. But again, my eternal optimism side is now there's people like Eric Weinstein and Elon Musk that are saying, yes, that is all true. And that's why we shouldn't be running one experiment. Right now we're one experiment, right, on Earth. And that's a risky thing when we've gotten to this point. We need to branch out. We need to get people on Mars, not because it's going to be financial, but just for survival. That is the next step. That is how we keep needing to move. That's why Eric Weinstein is trying to break the laws of physics. He's trying to he put forward geometric unity. It's his new theory for everything. And that should break the rules of Einsteinian physics so we can find a way to get past the speed of light, escape our solar system, right? That is what he's thinking of these next steps of where we have to go. I feel like for as bad and all those things that you said that are negative, I feel like the power of human ingenuity is always one step ahead. And it goes back to the same thing that we will kick and scream and we will burrow. We will find a way that is always that one step and we're always going to get there. But we need to be working towards it and we need to find those people. And when somebody like myself can recognize that in those people, I do everything in my power to try and raise them up and say like, oh, I see that Eric Weinstein and Elon Musk see this thing the same way I do, and they are making actionable strides to get us there. I need to support them with everything I have. That's my little part. Yeah. I'm not going to write any physics. I'm not going to build any rockets. I'm just not that guy.
You're probably not even going to be on the fucking rocket.
Exactly.
You know what's funny?
Let's not kid ourselves. We'll be sitting here watching the fucking bombs go off.
Yeah.
There's a podcast called Secret History of the Future. And what it does is it says sometimes when you're in the middle of something, like right now, we're like, for example, driverless cars. Mm-hmm. It says that sometimes everybody thinks that we're scared of them. We can't let them on the road. They might kill us. It might be unsafe. And what this podcast is set up is to say, let's go back in history and look at another time so we're not emotionally involved in it. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's cold. It's like 50 years ago. So for example, they go back and look at when the automobile replaced the horse and carriage.
Yeah.
And the articles in the newspapers and how people are viewing exactly the same as they're talking about. They can't let automobiles drive in the streets. They're too fast. They're too dangerous. People will die. Yeah. All this kind of stuff. So I'm trying to use that same mind thought as we're talking because we're really mixed into this. As much as I try not to be emotional about the whole COVID and masks and regulations and George Orwellian type of stuff. And Then I'm thinking, do you remember there's another Joe Rogan guy that was on there? He talked about cataclysmic events. Do you guys, did you ever that?
The probability of.
So what he says, I can't remember his name, but what he says is that there is a % chance every day that some giant asteroid or some volcano or something just decimates humanity. And he thinks that we know that it's happened because we know the craters. We see them. For example, there's theories that the ice age was brought on by an asteroid.
Yep.
I went to the middle of that asteroid. It was in Chicxulub, Mexico.
Yeah.
It's called Chicxulub, but it's spelled Chicxulub.
Yeah.
And they only found that crater in like maybe the 70s, 80s. Geologists were searching for oil. And they talk about the shock of this asteroid hitting Earth. The size of it, I can't remember. It was like 200 miles wide or something like that.
Yeah.
They say that the power that put on Earth, they said if they took all the nuclear weapons of all the U.S. and all of USSR at the same time, exploded them all at the same time, that crater was 10,000 times more powerful than that, than all of them. So so what I'm saying is that if we look back to that would have decimated humanity. We would have went back to whatever, the theories that humanity builds itself up. We get an asteroid or we get a solar flare, or we get a ice age or something like that. And humans, we're still here.
Yeah.
We're sitting here sipping on beers and talking to some fine Shure mics and that. So if that's true, then we can come back from COVID. We can come back from oppression. We can come back from
nothing.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
we can do it.
In the grand scheme of things, this whole thing is nothing.
Yeah.
Like we talked, did I send you that, what was it called? The fourth cycle or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I buy that. I can buy that. That's
what he's saying is that humanity, maybe we just go in cycles.
Yeah, 20-year cycles. 4 20-year cycles. So if you look at it, it's 80 years. This is the way it is. I mean, I haven't looked into this enough to perfectly buy into it. But like I told Kenny, I've been trying to say this for a long time and not been able to articulate it as well as this thing does. It's called the 4 something, whatever. Anyway, it says that, humanity's, our eras are broken down into 20-year blocks, right? So if you look, there was in North America, you have the Revolutionary War. 80 years later, you have the Civil War. 80 years later, you have the World Wars, right? Within a 20, 40-year span. But they consider, I think, World War II to be more of the, like, that was the last one, and then away you go. And we're due. According to this thing, we're due. And the way they said it was, the way I understood it, and I've been trying to say this for a long time, and this is the way that I think that it really resonates, is as I grew up in the bush. So a forest fire goes through, right? So that's your war. That's your last 20-year span. And it burns off everything. Kills a lot of trees. Not all of them, but kills a lot of shit. From there, you have this carbon-rich, fertile soil that comes right after that. Now that starts the first 20-year cycle of this 80-year cycle. Now things grow through there. There's no competition. You've taken out everything. It's a kind of a clean slate of sort, which would have been a lot like the late 40s and 50s in a lot of the world. I mean, everybody probably has their own cycle, and that's where I kind of struggle with this concept. Is it's like, well, everybody's kind of on a different cycle at the same time, but maybe you could take it as like a global thing. Maybe let's say. So you have this nice, rich, carbon-dense, fertile soil from all the death. Things begin to grow. Things start to rejuvenate. 20 years later, you have a fairly established populace of plants. Things get easier and easier, and all of a sudden, weakness, as I like to call it, starts to infiltrate. You get some weeds in there. You start getting some bugs coming in. And then all of a sudden, that, which was this strong, populated, lush green forest, you start to see some dead trees coming in there. You start seeing
some undergrowth.
Things just start it gets too thick. It gets too dense. As it gets too thick and too dense, it starts to choke out it starts to choke out the weaker plants, let's call them. Those weaker plants die and create tinder, right? Not the app you go bang chicks on, but like
real tinder. Old school
dry,
tinder.
like old school tinder, like fire tinder. Anyway, you you start to create all this tinder. Well, you get a spark. You never know what that spark is. So now you've gone through your 60 years. Boom, you get a spark. It lights that dead, weak shit that died because everything else was too strong. And it kills everything again. Just about everything.
And it starts all over.
And it starts all over again. So like I've said is, we're so worried about masks, and we're so worried about COVID, and we're so worried about this, and so worried about that, and don't take our freedoms and all this stuff. And it's almost like, take any awesome movie from like the 80s, like Rocky, Rambo, anything like that.
Yeah,
right?
Footloose.
Fuck yeah.
I threw your theory for a loop. I had to throw Footloose, didn't I? I'm old enough that
I'm sure there's a female version of this too, but like if you
E.T.
Dirty Dancing. Is that what you're but anyway, take these movies. Well, if you look at all those movies that we like to watch as men, now there's probably, I think women's books follow this actually, like those romance novels. Think about it like this. Every single one of those books and every single one of those movies has a template in which it operates under, right? It's the same concept, just has different actors, different plot, different climax, different all these things. I believe that that's what's happening right now is everybody's like, well, you can't call this person a Nazi because Nazis were this. And it's like, yeah, no, but there's still people that are representing that role in this movie. You know what I mean? And then you've got well, you can't call people, you can't call these, like people have said about these internment camps or whatever they are, COVID camps. Well, you can't compare that to, you can't compare that to a concentration camp in Nazi Germany or the gulags. It's like, no, but it's maybe, I mean, we'll see where it goes, but I think that will grow into something. But just because it's not exactly the same, it's like Rocky was different than Rambo, but they both went through they both had the same storyline backing their actions. Right. So, and I just think that that's where we're at. And I think we're getting close to the end of the movie, which is awesome. Because if you live through this movie, you get to go into the next movie. You know what I mean? And how do you as an individual make sure you make it to the next fucking movie? Because if you try to change the narrative of the movie, you're not going to. Mm-hmm. You don't get halfway through Rambo as an extra and say, cut, let's change the end of this, right?
Well, they did change the end of Rambo in the book. He died at the end, but everybody, when it came out,
you're Rambo.
Yeah. Everybody, I don't at all. I just heard this on a podcast yesterday.
Okay.
Apparently,
cool. I think this was meant to happen.
I think it was the Jordan Peterson podcast, but he said the original movie, they followed the book and they had him die at the end, but audiences hate it, so they went back, filmed a separate ending where he lives, and then released that one.
That would have been perfect.
That's what they're saying. Apparently, in the book, he does. I don't know my Rambo too well, but exactly what I'm hearing you say there is very close to a quote that Joe Rogan says all the time.
Which is what?
Hard times make hard men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard men make weak times. Weak times make weak men.
Yeah.
Weak men make hard times. And then it just keeps,
absolutely.
And it cycles and it cycles, right? It's the same thing.
So we get to fucking step up right now.
Right. But then,
that's awesome.
But then that's my argument for what you're saying. But then my argument against it is that 80-year cycle, and I agree with you, and I see this, and this really hit me a couple weeks ago. I read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and it was written in the 20s or the 30s.
I've read it, Ayn Rand. I want to, but I haven't read it.
It was an amazing book, but it is so cognizant of what is happening today. It's scary that she wrote this in the 20s or 30s, and it is the most spot on, breakdown of what we're dealing with right now. And it was
which book was it?
The Fountainhead. Okay. But apparently I've talked to a couple people, and apparently it's kind of the same motifs that she hits in most of her books. But this one just really impacted me just because of the journey I'm on. If you read, I feel like if you read the book, you didn't understand in chasing this podcast and this journey and about standing up and just chasing something that you value. Be damned what everybody else says and what society says they value, just following your thing, right? And
I'm all for that.
And that's the one. But kind of my counter argument to that is I agree that these things are cyclical, and we're seeing the same different characters play these same roles that have popped up in time after time. But I think that was happening. These 80-year cycles was happening. And in 80 years, there's a lot of change. But now we've never seen change like this. Like I would say the amount of change we've seen from 2000 to 2021 is probably equal to like 99 all the way back to 1800. Like we've had almost 200 years of change in the last 20 years. And I feel like it's maybe not throwing those cycles out altogether, but now the actors that are filling these roles are so drastically different than anything we've seen, we're having a hard time pointing them out, right? Like people say, you're saying like, hey, this seems like this to me, but it's so different that people are having a hard time putting their finger on, because like the internet version of those bad actors and those good actors is going to be a lot different, right?
Maybe the timeline. Sorry, Tyler. Because I've read before that humans, we try to understand our environment by seeing patterns, and then I've heard another thing that says everything's a pattern until it isn't. Right? You know what I mean? Like it's like if they look at like the last 3 80-year cycles, then we go, oh, I see. It's every 80 years, except for this one was 26. Right. Yeah. And so maybe you can overlap the two, is that maybe it's not so much in 20-year segments, but maybe it's the flow of society moves through these 4 stages.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
And maybe now, because of the spread of information and the spread of this, maybe we can take that 20 years and each of them are 6 years or 8 years. Or, maybe, hey.
Or maybe to say what you said is maybe you're used to watching Westerns and now Star Trek came out. Or not Star Trek, Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, the movie's still 2 hours long, but not that one. It's like 1,400 hours long or whatever the fuck it is. But like, I never watched Star Wars, by the way, but I just know that it was futuristic at the time. But all of a sudden you're watching John Wayne and then boom, Star Wars comes out. And it's like, we've never seen this before.
But it's the same story.
Yeah, but Joseph Campbell was he builds the hero's journey, which is kind of the thing. I mean, it fits in a movie. I'm not saying that this is any correlation to that, because it's not. But that hero's journey is always the underlying story to everything that you want men to watch. You know what I mean? Because like, we're men, so let's talk about fucking men stuff. We're not talking about women's books, because they follow their own thing. But again, it's like, see, that's my take on it, is I don't think we have sped it up. I think it's right on time.
Maybe. Actually, when Ken said that popped something else in my head. And this is, again, I'm figuring this out on the fly, so maybe I'm wrong, but also another possibility could be that things have changed so rapidly and things have gotten so easy that maybe we're stuck in one. Maybe it's, that cycle of weak times. I feel like we're in, if I had to guess what we're in, I would say we're in the weak end point, and we're creating, we're going to be, it feels like we're creating some hard times. But
life crisis stage is what they call it.
But life is so easy right now that we're just creating more and more weak men, and the hard times aren't coming because everybody's got, things are so bountiful. Technology and the internet and everything has made it so easy on everyone that hard times just aren't coming, and we just are expanding out this period of the weak men so long that I agree with you that what to me that says is we have a big hard time coming for us.
For sure.
And that would be something like you say of an asteroid or a solar flare knocking out the power grid or something like
nuclear war.
Any of those things could put us into that. But that almost rings more true when I say it out loud, and just what I feel is maybe that's what it is, where things have gotten so easy that the natural cycles that things have expanded out, and we're kind of stuck in one. And maybe that's more what it is, right?
But why do we think it's so hard? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's because, what we say things are so easy.
Because evolutionarily,
but everybody thinks it's so hard.
I'll tell you exactly why, Tanner. Because evolutionarily, for us to grow, we need conflict. We need pressure makes diamonds, right? That's what.
Have you read? You're sounding like Nassim Taleb. Have you read?
I've just seen him.
I love Nassim. Yeah. Actually, a good buddy of mine had a disagreement because we're disagreeing with him on something. One of my friend had Nassim Taleb reply to his tweet the other day.
Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah. I won't go to. I'll come back to you. Yeah. But you're because Nassim Taleb is all about he overlaps economic systems with biologic systems and it's all about stress. Things get stronger with stress. Exactly. And so, for example, a financial crisis of 2008. He said that the best thing we should have done is let biology play it out. Mm-hmm. If you were a stupid bank that made a bunch of stupid bets and put too much money in too many weird places,
knowing to be bailed out.
Die, because that means that you did stupid decisions. But by bailing them out, they shouldered the American people with all the debt, and they sent a signal to the markets that said, go ahead and be stupid, and you can survive.
For sure.
But then if they would have let them die, the rest of us said, I can't act like that. I need to act stronger to survive. Mm-hmm. So what you're getting into is, I think you'd like it. It's called Nassim Taleb Anti-Fragile. He wrote a few good books.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Where we disagreed with him is where I'm in a book club here in town, and is on vaccines. He's all for these vaccines, saying obviously you should take it, but it disagrees with his take on anti-fragility, which means some things get stronger with stress.
Right.
Human body, a muscle. You push it to the edge, you get stronger.
Your immune system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he has a thing called the Lindy effect. Basically, anything that's been around for a long, long time, respect it. because it's been around for a long time. It's stood the test of time.
Just like Jordan Peterson's, I think it's rule 3 in the new book, don't meaninglessly degrade like societal systems or something. I totally butchered that, right? But that's one of his rules. It's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And so, Dustin had a tweet saying like, come on, Nassim Taleb, like, how can you say the vaccines are we should all take them when you just wrote a chapter on the Lindy effect, it's called, and he made fun of him and got pissed off at him and this, that, which is kind of cool.
Oh, like Nassim Taleb got pissed off at him?
Dustin. Yeah.
What did he say?
He was saying something, and then I responded to that one, and he was like, I'm sick and tired of people using my own book against myself, or I don't know. Like, it just doesn't make sense. To me, it doesn't make sense. So I've kind of lost a little bit of faith in Nassim Taleb myself after that.
Yeah, but I mean, there's another thing too, and
he thinks it's multiplicative. He thinks that the risk of coronavirus running is multiplicative, and therefore lets him abort his Lindy effect theory. I don't know.
And honestly, I've met a lot of famous people in my life, and they're all fucking douchebags.
Yeah.
But they still create good stuff, so just appreciate what he wrote for what it is, and just assume he's a dipshit.
But come back to what you're saying, though, is some things get stronger with stress.
Yeah. And that's where I'm going back to, right? So now, over thousands of years, evolutionarily, that is how we're built. That's how our minds work, is to take that stress and build upon it, right? And the bigger the stress, the bigger the growth. That is how everything works. So that is our base operations. Now, life gets easier and easier, and those stresses change. Now, you don't have those same stresses. Like you say, if you're living out in the bush on your own, free as you would put it in your terms, you're going to have a lot of stress. You live in a society today, that stress comes in different forms, but our brains don't have thousands of years of evolution to know how to live in an easy society. So now, how they deal with that is that any stress, whatever your 10 to you is evolutionarily like a 10. So now, say the hardest thing is your internet going out, that to you is getting chased by a lion back in the day. That is your responses.
Same thing as Fortnite making you think you're at war.
Exactly.
It's the exact same. Yeah.
It's those things, and that is what I think is creating that whatever I was trying to say of like it's what a 10 is to somebody is based. It's perspective based, right? And we're evolutionary designed to make that's what you're asking of. Why does everybody feel like these are such easy times? Why does this feel hard to them? Yeah. Because evolutionarily we're based for that. And that's how you have growth, right?
Say at the end of that is it's because you're always at the mercy of the perspective of your current position,
which is a good thing to me, Tanner, because I feel like in a society this easy, if we weren't based like that, we'd all just get fat and lazy and everything would crumble.
Well, we did,
but we are. But here's the piece. Here's my piece, and I think you guys are going to like this. Is I think that is good, and people should be feeling that. And whatever's hard, whatever it's a breakup, whatever that is, that feels like a 10 to you. You have to have that. But now what we have is a society that tells everybody there's always an easy way out. It's never your fault. You can always blame something else. So now that stress is adding on to you, but now you have no outlets to overcome it, and you're never getting better. You're never growing because you always have an excuse. That is the piece. I think it's good for people to feel that these things are hard because that's what's going to make them grow. But what you need to do is tell them the message that it's all on personal accountability. It's up to you to take that and to grow from it. And if you just give them that easy out to say, you can blame racism, and you can blame, the scientific method and institutional racism, and you can blame all these things. It's never your fault. Now, not only is life easy and people are, that's where the depression comes in, because now you're sitting there and you have no outlets. You're never growing. It's always just bad. And it feels like it's closing in on you because you're not knocking those off. You're not overcoming anything. You're not getting stronger. You're just sitting there.
These are really cool discussions, actually. Like I find Nick, you got a cool vibe to you, man. Like,
thanks, I appreciate that.
Like,
I think I do too.
You're a good host. No, you do. No, you do. This is really cool, and it's cool talking to other people. Like Jordan Peterson says, like he always refers to other theories, right? But is it throwing your ideas out to other humans and see the bounce back, right? And sometimes you say something, and 9 out of 10 people look in the room like, that was stupid. You're like, okay, I'll change, right? But so I'm finding that as we're talking, is that I'm like, I get it now, because I'm getting caught up sometimes in the daily stress of this COVID crap. Yeah. And if we think about Nietzsche, right? Again,
you said it right.
I said it right.
Nice.
I said it right.
You nailed it.
Fucking say it right on our podcast, but you say it right.
And if we think about
people's.
Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile, is that Tanner, you come at it from a negative perspective, which I don't agree on, but I do agree that the hardest times, it's the stress or the challenging times that define you and will be your most exciting parts of your life. Mm-hmm. Like in my marriage, when I think about my wife, the hardest of the days are the things that bond us.
Yeah.
And so maybe as opposed to looking at this as stress and strife, it's like, bring it on. This is our time.
When I do that, you call me negative.
But you know what? I think I just need to come at it from my own way, in that I love humans and I love good people. And I think there's always going to be people that will feed the hungry. There'll always be a good Samaritan. I understand there'll be some people who will step on somebody's head and kill them if they can make a dollar. Yeah. I get that too. I'm not denying that. But, maybe this is fun. Maybe this is like perfect. Stress us.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's bankrupt this country. Exactly. Let's go to town. Let's see what we're made of. And I'll tell you, I'll spin it one more time, is that I've spent a lot of time, like you've practiced some jiu-jitsu and we do some MMA and this, that is, it's funny because maybe this, and just tell me when you want to cut us off here, if
no worries, go all day.
But we talk about, like Tanner's big on masculinity and so am I. I mean, but it's interesting. My wife said to me that day, she's stressed over this all. Like my wife is, she's kind of, what the heck's going on here? Like, where are we in another 10 years? And when we say we're from north of the river, what that means is we're from a pretty rough and tough place. Yeah, you could
say that.
Yeah. And sometimes I think when I was younger, my wife thought I was maybe a little too wild. And, but now,
but that's why she married you.
Probably.
It's called masculinity.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like I'm not afraid of a little bit of violence. I don't like violence, but I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
And the average human being walks into my house that shouldn't be there. There's a real good chance it's going to go in my favor. Not if it's Andrew.
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
But my point is it was interesting. My wife came to me and said, "I'm so thankful I'm married to you." I'm like, "Why?" She goes, "Because if shit gets out of hand, I think I got a decent chance with you by my side." Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, I've never felt so manly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like which is kind of cool. But how did that come? Because I got a wild side, because I'm not afraid to fight if I had to. And I've got a strong mind, I think. And maybe that brought some goodness out of us by pressuring us to three of us are on a couch. We've just spent the last hour and a half. I don't even know what time we're at now. Talking about how hard this is and how we're kind of smiling. It's kind of fun and maybe we should be enjoying it. Like you say, we never would have got here if there wouldn't have been some times of strife.
No, this is
so amazing. Maybe it's wonderful.
This is,
maybe it's good.
Yeah. You know what? If this was over tomorrow, a lot of people would be like, they could go tomorrow and just be like, we got you. Everybody go back to work. And everybody would be like, oh, like there's nothing more exhilarating to me. Anyway, I don't know where you go. I love walking in because I don't wear a mask. I haven't worn a mask in fucking 6 months, I don't think. And you walk into a store and you're like, I'm the only one in here without a mask on. Like, that's awesome. Like when else in life do you get a chance to say, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in? You know what I mean? We don't get those times. Like my grandpa fought in World War II and did some nasty shit to some nasty people. And I think that that's awesome because he got to do that. What do we got? I rapped Mario Brothers when I was 12. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What do we got? We got nothing. And this is starting to look like we're probably going to have something.
Do you think there's any, like the statement, careful what you wish for? Because when I read Gulag Archipelago, right, the book I was talking about with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, is he said a lot of the same things. He said some of the most, I forget what he said, most religious experiences or the most like fruitful,
transcendent.
Transcendent, the times that he feels like when you're locked up in a jail cell or when you're waiting to see if you're the one that's going to get drug out and tortured next. There's a certain
electricity
that runs at the same time. It's nasty to.
It's that primal thing we had for thousands of years, and then you only get to appreciate.
But torture, while, right? He talks about like like some nasty. I won't do it because it's hard to even talk about. But those are like gut wrenching. Like, are we ready to get our nails ripped out of our hands? Are we ready to get our testes stepped on by a set of war boots? Because we won't confess to something.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are we sure we want this? Do we really want this?
You can't be sure.
Yeah.
No, like nobody's sure.
Yeah.
But I go back to that, Tanner, of what we talked about earlier, where I feel like we don't understand how far we've progressed, and we have this envisionment in our brain of if shit really hit the fan, we really had to go to war, and what we would do. And I feel like we have no idea. Just like when you listen to Countdown to Armageddon, They had no idea what World War I was going to be. They had all these new toys that had been relatively peaceful. They had all these weapons of war that they just wanted to test out. That is one of the most haunting things that stays with me from that whole series was how much he talks about that. There was people that talked about, and it was planned that they wanted to go to war because they wanted to test these out, and they were throwing people into the meat grinder just to see, to test these new machines. They talk about the impact of barbed wire. They'd never have barbed wire in war, right? And just how impactful that was on the entire trench warfare was having just barbed wire, right? Something you wouldn't really put too much thought with. Now, imagine since probably Vietnam, what America has, right? Like Afghanistan, that's one thing, but it's a different thing. It's insurgency. It's a different kind of warfare where you can it really took us back.
It's what we're kind of facing now.
Right?
If you look at each side not liking each other, if you look at this as some sort of a culture war within our country, let's say, because let's just say there's a left and a right. It's insurgency because you're stuck within each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a new way of overpopulated warfare. But anyway, sorry.
But kind of where I'm going with that is I think we just have no idea what that's going to look like.
No, we have no clue.
If we got if we saw two major powers go to war right now, I don't think it would look like anything we've ever seen. I think there's and just on top of that too, I think there's shit we haven't like that they've got in their back pocket that we've never seen that is so devastating and so.
It would have to be something we've never seen before, or it wouldn't be war.
Exactly. Right? That is almost the definition of war, of just seeing what you've never seen before.
We have to accept that that's probably the fate of a new war.
But that's where I'm saying I feel like that is the one thing holding us back, because I agree that there's so much telling us, but I feel like there's people at a certain level that understand that and know what's in the back pocket and realize that it's almost, like they talk about that idea of mutually assured destruction when nukes came onto the scene. We almost have that with 50 different things. It's not just we have mutually assured destruction in 50 different ways, right?
For sure.
And they realize that. So now it's like, what are we going to go to war and just decide, okay, we're going to only use our 67th most dangerous weapon in our arsenal just to keep things from going too far? Like where does that draw the line? And then who's going to follow the rules? So now we say, okay, we're only going to ban these top 50 most effective weapons that we have in our repertoire. And we're just going to go down to, 51 and deeper. And now one guy breaks the rule and he uses number 48, and that's some fucking thing we've never seen before. And the game's all over.
Dan Carlin talks about it, and it's hilarious in Countdown to Armageddon, the World War I.
Yeah.
When he talks about kind of the war kicking off and people starting to, you have these countries that, they had guns, right? And you had armor. You started to have this a more modern sense of warfare. And he said, it's funny how there was certain battalions, I think there were the French, I believe, don't quote me on that, but I believe it was the French, that showed up in plumed hats, swords on horseback.
Yeah, for
thinking,
sure.
Okay.
Well, you're thinking of Poles.
In their full bright outfits.
Are you talking World War I?
Yeah. And they're let's go to war.
They're so happy about their cavalry.
Yeah.
Those are Poles.
Yeah. So they're sitting there riding out on horses with swords, ready to go to war.
Yeah, because they were strong in World War I with their cavalry.
Yeah, and everybody's sitting there shooting at each other with guns and shit, and they're like, what's going on?
Tank versus horse.
Yeah. Well,
they learned quickly what the new...
Or maybe...
Tanks didn't
are we talking World War I or
World War I?
Or Duke Ferdinand was World War I. I'm sorry.
World War I is when they showed up on horseback, ready to fight, which looked like a civil type war.
Right.
And it's funny because that's exactly what you talk about. Is we're going to be like, okay, I'm going to go to war like this.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with my little short-barreled shotgun at home.
It's like, no, you're not. That's not how this works. Yeah. That's why I was laughing. Like I told Ken the one day, I was like, everybody's like, we're stocking up on guns. I'm going to get a bunch of guns. I'm like, they don't need guns. They don't need to control your guns. They control your mind.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, we might need guns to save yourself for an extra 8 or 9 minutes. I'm totally cool with that. That's exactly what I want. That's how I want to go. But that's not the war.
Right.
That won't be the war.
That's a scrum.
Yeah, right? That's not the war. The war will look nothing like the last war, because that's not how war works. This is not the way it works, And Nick, we're 80 years removed from the last war.
Nick, you go as long as you want, and because you know what your listeners like and what they don't like. You just zip this when you're done.
If you guys let me, I will keep you here for about 8 hours. Yeah. I can go.
Can I reverse it on you?
Of course, I love it. That's my favorite part.
Change up gear. So you because I want to understand you a bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
So you grew up in Slave Lake?
Yes, sir.
And you're telling me you're in the fuel business, which we're sitting here in some people's house who are in
the Hancocks, family friends for a long time, for sure.
Now, so you grew up, you graduated out of Save Lake?
Yeah, I at 18, finished high school, went off to U of A, did a business degree at the U of A.
Yeah.
Was pretty disenfranchised with the whole university system, what it was, what I saw there, the lack of conversation, the lack of freedom to talk about things. If it wasn't in that narrow narrative that they wanted, they would fail you. You couldn't bring up any other counterpoints. You couldn't try anything. It was, this is what we want. If you don't serve this up to us how you want. And I learned very quick, I'm a fucking bullshitter from way back. I know how to give people what they want. And I just learned, this is not my fight. This is not worth it for these people. You're not worth it to me to stand up and I'm just going to get my piece of paper and get out of here. And then I'm going to go live in the real world. But that was hard for me I love standing by my values and I hate, I'm fine with any, my value system is so different from what society's is. And I'm fine with that. As long as I feel good about something.
Or is it though? Maybe it's a silent majority.
I don't know. That's exactly it. And I make that argument all the time. I'm glad you called me on that because I do make that argument. I think that just like with COVID, if you look at all the restrictions and all the news, you would think that a lot of people were on the side of that, but I haven't found one person in real life that thinks that way. Right. But the way
which way?
That agrees with these lockdowns, agrees with that these are the right decisions that we're making. I haven't found one person in real life that is agreeing with it. Online, for sure.
Yeah.
But in real life, every time I talk to someone, say, hey, how are you doing? Oh man, I'm pretty sick of this. This doesn't seem right. I have a lot of questions. This just doesn't, there's something wrong here. And I hear that from every person I talk, and clearly biased because of where I live and who I interact with, right? And that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I agree with that silent majority. But yeah, no, so graduated school, went back to my hometown, and in that 4 years, that was a big thing for me. And it's interesting to hear you guys talk about masculinity and the power of that and stuff. And growing up in Slave Lake, that's all there was. Right?
Masculinity.
There's
no lack of masculinity in Slave Lake, Alberta.
No, exactly. And that's what everything was. But I'm a very, a feminine guy in ways. I'm very masculine in all my other ways too. And I grew up and I played hockey, but I loved to read. I loved Harry Potter. But I wouldn't tell any of my buddies that because I made the mistake one time in the hockey locker room of talking about how much I love Harry Potter and reading books. And I never heard the end of it. So I realized really quickly, okay, there's certain parts of me that I can still enjoy and I just won't bring them up.
Feminine.
Right. But but it was, really and just one of those things. Right. But I found that as I got out of university and realized that I had no outlets, I was so out of touch with my feminine side. Right. And when you look at Jordan Peterson, what he argues is always for the balance of the two. And I do think that right now it's easy to fight for the masculine side because it's been such under attack for the last very many years. But in my head, I'm just trying to argue for a balance between the two. And I find that with this podcast, it's allowed me to be who I am 100%, just genuine of everything I'm interested in, the whole gambit from my very feminine, emotional compassion, because I am a very loving guy. I'm a lover, not a fighter deep down. That doesn't mean, like you said, if someone comes in my house, I'm not going to, pull every move I've seen in UFC for the last 4 years, right? And do everything I could. But I see value in that. And especially the amount I've been reading and listening to Jordan Peterson lately and the arguments that he's making. You talked about earlier about having an idea that you just couldn't articulate, right? And I feel like when I read someone like Jordan Peterson, I feel like I've felt all these things he's talking about. I just never had I was never armed with the words and the vocabulary to speak them and bring them to light. And just by reading them now, it gives me that. And I can then express it to other people and take my own twist on it. I'm not just going to repeat what Jordan Peterson said. I'm going to find my own twist on it and make that argument, right? Like one of the big ones I was thinking actually earlier was when you were talking about these stories and these archetypes going over and over again. I did a podcast with these two authors, which was one of the highlights of this whole podcasting journey so far in the first
talking about
10 months. Yeah. And they write these amazing, amazing fiction books about a future. I think you guys really like, if you like any fiction, it's about this dystopian future where the society collapsed because of VR, right? The virtual reality got to the point where everybody was just in these VR machines, wouldn't come out, very similar, very cognizant of what's happening today and kind of where society's going if you extrapolate. And it kind of all collapsed. And then they restructured society and made all these changes, all those structures that we're talking about that are holding everyone back, those all collapsed, and they build up a new one on a new set of principles. But I don't want to give away too much of the books, but it really goes on that way of how you define freedom, kind of what you were bringing up earlier. And they have this, so this guy frees himself. He's this multi-billionaire, like just the king of the world, the Elon Musk at this time. And he frees himself because he's dying and he can't find a solution and just hides himself away with, some stashed gold and kind of things he thinks are going to be valuable in the future. And he wakes up in this new world where the idea of freedom, the entire idea of society is totally restructured. And it's in a way where, everything is incorporated. corporations run everything. The government is absolutely handcuffed. They have a bunch of very small roles. They're not allowed to ever make money. And it's super interesting. I think you guys really like it. It is an absolute mindfuck to listen to this. And you can now invest in people, right? Like I could buy stock in Ken Rutherford.
Oh, wow.
Right. And now you're invested in that, and companies will do that. And now there's a incentive for you to be healthy and happy, and to find you a job that you're going to encourage, because that's going to make you the most productive and that's going to make them the most money. It's very interesting. And everybody's so into this, they can't see the.
Sounds like it should be a movie.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. These books are so incredible, and I read a lot of books. Like I'm
Matrix type of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like and that's just the first one, and then they go on. But this guy wakes up that remembers his idea of what freedom was, and it so doesn't match with what they've gotten to, what their idea of freedom is, that there's a pushback. And what he is now a reminder of what it was, and he's waking people up to a different idea of freedom, and it turns into war, and then it goes into what war is going to look like on those scales in the future. That idea, right, with nanotechnology and a lot of these ideas, just like we're talking about, where everyone's so worried about the mutually assured destruction with nukes, where we could have that with a million different things. Anyways, sorry, where I was going with that. So I had these authors on. I just wanted to plug their books a bit because I just think they're amazing. They're in California now, but I'm not sure where they grew up. Now that I
you read these guys.
I'd read these guys.
I listened to your podcast with the fellow that's a specialist in getting podcasts.
Oh, right, Kaylee Marks. Yeah,
and you kept referring to these authors that you were so pumped that you got these authors.
Yeah, and that was not far removed. I was just, because I'll tell you the full story of how I got them on. It was the first time that I did an episode in this. I have a little studio that I get to use at the U of A. It's actually a buddy of mine that they built a podcast studio in the Students' Union.
Oh, at the university.
Yeah, at the University of Alberta. And they're actually going to start renting it out to people to use for podcasts. And if COVID's kind of throwing a wrench in that, it's just the fact that I know them and the whole university's closed down. So we just go in there and kind of use it every now and again. But that step forward of being able to feel, it was two things. So not only that, but then I also, the guy that helped me run it, he was helping me with the podcast and doing some of the YouTube things. But just to have somebody at that point, I feel so strongly about this podcast and what I'm going to turn it into and where I'm going to take it. And I feel like it's been very frustrating to have people not believe in me, but just, they don't take it seriously. They all kind of, they laugh it off like, hey, maybe, sure. But like nobody, where I am so sure that this is going to be a really big thing at a certain point. And I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to manifest that. I'm going to bring it to that point. But talking with Brendan that weekend, he took it seriously. And when I would throw all these crazy ideas, because I have wild ideas for where I want to take this podcast and just naturally grow it to the point. But then once it's at that point of different ways to build it and build a studio where I can bring in other people and help people start their own podcasts and all these things. And he took it serious. And just that feeling of having someone take my crazy ideas serious and not just like, oh, okay, seems cool, but all right, if you want to do that, here's what you got to do. Well, you're going to need a website. You got to do this. And he was hitting the ball back to me. It wasn't just me rallying against the wall against myself, and he was getting back. And that gave me such this flood of, just feeling good about what I'm doing. I'm on the right track. And then going to the studio the next day and feeling like I was in the big leagues. I had a guy on the boards. I had cameras. I had, an actual.
This is a buddy at university, or a guy that was working at Students' Union, or
both. Yeah, a buddy that has been working at the Students' Union for 10 years. He pretty much runs.
Oh, so he's like the executive director, or whatever.
Kind of, yeah. I don't know what his title is, but whatever his title is, it's not enough. He runs that fucking entire university would collapse without that guy in it. Like He's one of those guys that doesn't want the accolades, but is so capable and such a good dude. And I think his personality turns people off about him because he's a bit of a gruffer guy, and you need to know how to. He's almost intimidating, right? When you talk to him, it seems like he's mad on top. But you just need to know his personality. He's the nicest guy. Anyways,
are you okay saying his name?
Brendan, yeah, Brendan Murphy. I've had him on the podcast. Actually, he's one of the episodes. I did one with him.
I've heard you talk about it, like about the you had some stuff with students or not. What's the residence there?
The Lister Hall there.
Yeah,
that was a fun one. And I got an interesting story to tell you after the podcast. It's not one I can say on here, but an interesting story that came out of that, and just remind me of it later. Man, I'm going on a real weird tangent here, but just that feeling of being so fired up about what I was doing. When I got back on that Monday back to GP, I picked, it's hard for me. I just feel like I'm not at the point where I can reach out to guys like that, these authors and these guys that are established. And I was like, I feel like I'm pretty established now, and I'm really happy. So I just, on a whim, shot out to a couple big people, and those are the guys that responded. And ended up being a really nice guy, got in a chat with him, found we had a bunch of things in common, and he was willing, and his brother is another interesting guy, and he was willing to come on. So we made it happen. And all it took was that. I feel like I was holding myself back by thinking, I'm not at the point where I can ask these guys yet. And that's such a limiting idea, right? And I swear I'm going to tie this all back to where I first tried to bring this in when I brought the authors up, right? So then I had that amazing experience, had them on. And one of the things the guy said to me was, I was talking about another set of books I really love called, it's Aragon series, another fantasy, just series.
You say it again?
Aragon. It's about dragons and shit. It's just a books that I really loved in junior high school, and was something I've reread since then. And one of the brothers goes, I could ruin that for you if I wanted. And I said, whatever. Like, I don't think so. I really like it. I don't think you're going to ruin it. It's just Star Wars. And I said, yeah, okay. So it is, right? And when he talked about it, it's still the same plot points. Like you're saying, these stories.
Campbell.
But then,
you know the book?
No, but
just the
Joseph Campbell
the hero's journey. Yeah,
like
that's what they're referring to.
I don't know anything about Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, so
it's the template for.
I've heard
template for you to want to read something.
Okay,
right.
Like it's the cycles you talk about. Like it's like
it's the story.
Leaves,
I'll put it in terms. I think So Jordan Peterson is also very much in that idea of thinking, but where Jordan Peterson takes it a step further is he talks about where that hero's journey came from. Because now you can say Aragon is just Star Wars. You can say Star Wars is just X. You can say all this thing. And then all those things go back to the Bible. And the Bible goes back to the whatever of Gilgamesh or whatever it's called. And they all go back further and further. Epic of Gilgamesh, right? And these things are all just repeating in the flood story and all these things, and they're finding. And I always saw that, but I didn't know, okay, that seems true, but what am I going to do with that? But where Jordan Peterson really switched the script on me, when you look at, I don't know if you watch these, but that debate series he did with Sam Harris, where they went around the country and talked about these kind of ideas in religion. And Sam Harris kind of takes the atheist point but they do it respectfully. Oh, they are amazing. This is the thing that kind of kicked me back into Jordan Peterson. I found those and I started rewatching. That's what's got me back into reading a bunch about him and listening to his podcast a lot. But what he's saying is that way, way, way before all that, people just evolved to the point where we could start to be self-referential and we could start telling stories. We gain language. And what are you going to tell stories about? What you see. So these stories, that hero's journey, is just people telling stories about what they saw and what they saw of humanity with themselves. And then over those years, they start to get twisted and it starts to become myth, right? But at the very basis of what it was just the very core of human nature told out in these narratives. Because if you listen to Jordan Peterson, nobody listens to these. Nobody's going to listen and take in information unless it's put into a really juicy narrative that has these points. I wonder
if the reaction, I bet you there was some sort of, the reaction to the story helped to write the way to tell the story.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're saying that the Bible's written in a way
that
of parables.
Yeah. Like if I tell you a story and then I tell you, and I watch how Hitler was the fucking king of this. I tell you a story.
Yeah.
And I watch how you react to different pieces of that story. And I watch you, and when I say this certain thing, I'm like, oh, he really bought in during this part. He didn't buy in during the rest. And I start telling you, and then I add that piece in, and maybe you switch something else up, and then, oh, fuck, you buy into this other point. So all of a sudden you have a way to tell stories to keep people interested in said story. I don't know that for sure, but I'm assuming that's probably.
I think you're like, again, this is, I forget who said this, but it doesn't matter. Is that sometimes we think that right now we're the smartest that humanity's ever been.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's actually, anyway, because they say that the Neanderthal's brain was actually like 200 cc's bigger than ours. Which we just have more technology than.
But like again, I say his name a lot. So he obviously had an impact on my life. But Nassim Taleb, the Lindy effect, is the Bible wasn't written in its way, as a fluke. It wasn't just right? Some people just pop in and just scribbling some stuff down. They said, "You make some sense of this." Yeah, sure. If they wrote in parables, they knew how the human brain worked. They knew how people thought about things and what would have an impact on their life. And if you're at university and somebody rattles off a big long multi-Greek alphabet formula on the board, it doesn't mean a bunch to you. But if they can tell a story to it, now you can leave and tell your friends about the story because it had an emotional role to it. So sure, like the fact that we're still talking about it, how many thousands of years later, I actually don't know. When did they figure that the earliest Bible parts of the Bible were written?
Well, it was
obviously Jesus born 2020 years ago.
But yeah, it would have been just after that.
Yeah,
but Old Testament
40 years.
Yeah, well, I feel like they always just taking this is 100% from Joe Rogan. He always talks about those the Dead Sea Scrolls is the earliest evidence. I don't want to say he always says it's 3,000 years, give or take.
Pre-Christ.
Yeah, like that. That's but that's like Old Testament stuff, right? And then New Testament is all obviously after in that. But there's all you want to talk like the flood story and Cain and Abel and all. I think
so they learned something in those thousands of years of what makes humans. Like in First Nations here in our area, I think aren't they? How do they describe the culture as a storytelling culture?
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know. So why do they do that? Because it sticks.
Well, and they told stories too because I think everybody told stories. They were probably labeled storytellers because they didn't actually document much of it.
You couldn't document,
and
that's
document
true.
it if you have nothing to document it with.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, of that natural process of telling the story over and over again and finding little pieces to fine tune it. But now, what the point I was trying to get at with that hero's journey and how archetypal it is to everybody is because, you know, so many of those stories, whether it's the Native Americans that were over here or people over in you know, Israel and in that area of the world, the Middle East, that is coming out. The same stories are coming out. And the reason, and this is when I heard Jordan Peterson say this, it was like, oh, obviously, because all those stories are just that's the story. That is the human story. That is just our ways to add parable and narrative around what they were seeing of themselves at the earliest time that they can remember when they first started telling stories. That's why they're so similar. Because it's just the recognition of human nature, of just us watching each other, right? As we start to talk and be able to tell stories, what are you going to tell stories about? Just what you see in the people. So you're looking at the most raw human nature before you had society and clothes and all this stuff to complicate it and really bring it. At the very base, that's what all these stories are passed on and based off of, right? That's why they're so similar. And that's why they're so important. That's why they're so, because that is the core of being, with the evolutionary, the deep stuff, the stuff that's deep within us that really hits the core of your heart, right? The reason Star Wars sucks you in and tells that story is because that is the story. That is us. And that's why every story ever told is some sort of variant on that hero's journey, is because of that. And they all have the same beats. It's because that is the story of our very earliest evolution, right? And Jordan Peterson doesn't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true, but to me, that rings true. Like when I hear that seems, just with all the things that I've read and learned over the world, that seems very true to me, right? And that's why I feel confident in passing on, saying that to you guys, because when I heard that rings true to me.
Well, it's funny because I liken a lot of what's going on right now with just human nature.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, and that's why I think I had such a reaction to Nietzsche. And I mean, and let's be honest. I mean, I've tried to read the actual Nietzsche. I don't know German, but I mean like the English translation of Nietzsche, and then I read some more modern translations of it. And
could you actually read, like, what is it? Thus spoke Zarathustra. Like, can you read the book? Well, I get more out of I need some summaries of it.
Yeah, I like to have somebody narrate it to me in a more modern sense. And you know, I'm a meathead. But
maybe we all are.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, what that taught me, what you're saying there, is it's such a cool parallel to that, and that is like human nature is about trying to do the best you can for the people that you support and that support you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's weird how.
Could you repeat that statement? What did you say?
Like
human nature is what?
Human nature is doing. So we're bacteria.
Yeah.
That's what we are. We're a parasite. We're actually a very effective parasite is what we are. If you ask, you know, environmentalists, we're highly adaptable parasites, but we're bacteria. We're no different. Like Earth is Earth. Now, maybe we're descendants of aliens or something. I don't know. Joe Rogan would know more about that.
Are we deeper than that though?
Yeah,
because bacteria wants to live on their own. But there's
like
some
colonies.
Humans.
Bacteria loves colonies.
Oh, I see. So they all are
so
altruistic.
What I'm saying is we're made up of the same material as bacteria.
With it, yeah.
So therefore, everything on this planet operates in the same way. And this is a theory actually I came up with myself that will not be new, but it's kind of what I came up with myself from diving into Nietzsche theory, and then actually Jack Donovan is another guy that I actually.
Have you read him before? Jack
Donovan? Very good.
He just got me on his books.
It's interesting. It works good for me. I don't know if it worked good for everybody.
Oh, it makes sense. I like it.
But anyway, what my take coming out of it was, so we're humans, and we're not even humans. We are a life form on Earth. So therefore, we operate on the same level as all the other life forms on Earth. So bacteria, what's bacteria's job? To feed and reproduce, right? And to try to do whatever is evolutionary or adaptatively necessary in order to make sure that that bacteria cancer will do the exact same thing inside your body. And we're no different, right? We seem to think that we are, but we're not. I don't think. But what happens is you're going to do what is ever best for the longevity of whatever strain of DNA you carry. Therefore, like, we think that there's good and evil in the world, but there isn't. There's winners and losers is what there is. And what we have right now is this we're in a weird time where, like, I look at like a guy like our current prime minister and I'm like, he's evil, right? He's doing exactly what he needs to do to ensure the longevity of his genetic line. That is exactly what he is doing, right? I am sitting out here in Alberta trying to do exactly what I think is right to ensure the longevity of my genetic line. That is it. Now, we think we're above that, but at the end of the day, if you have to kill my children to make sure yours live, you will do it, and you will do it fucking happily. Most people would, right? Unless you really don't like your kids. But for the most part, you will, at some point, you will destroy everything to make sure your genetics get to be the genetics that, right? So here we are, and like you said, we've got these constant stories that come out in our evolution. And, well, of course. I mean, what does every hero have? He has humble beginnings. He has an exit from humble beginnings. He has strife in which he overcomes, in which then he can, like, let's look at Rocky, for example. He gets in there and then, he's got to go out and he fights. And then there's always that training fucking sequence with like a Survivor track, like Burning Heart playing as he's fucking packing logs up a mountain. So it's like he's overcoming himself. He then takes his fight to something that's bigger and stronger than him. And of course he wins and he gets the girl and he goes home, right? That's what we've decided in our minds will be the best way for our genetics to continue to move on throughout the lines of evolution and throughout human history. So we're sitting here saying, and that's why I don't take any of this. I used to get so involved in everything that's going on. Like Kenny and I were in podcasts like, we got to stop this. But it's like, you know what? It's a bunch of fucking bugs in a petri dish seeing who makes it out.
But
and that's what we are. So it's like, I can tell you who ain't going to make it out, and that's the weak.
Right.
Because nature will always get rid of the weak. We just got to decide where 250 million years of, or 2.5 or whatever you want to say, million years of people, what was considered strength. What my take is if you have 2.5 million years of what's considered strength, are you going to all of a sudden say, we redetermined strength in the last 40 years and that's what we're going to go with? Because I don't know. I mean, and then you could decide if strength is power, and then power is usually has the biggest stick. Biggest stick is usually based in technology, and then you can throw my argument right out the window.
Right.
But at the end of the day, strong people will be who gets at it.
These are really interesting debates.
Yeah, they are.
Because like in years gone by, it was a 250-pound person with the biggest club.
Yeah.
Today, it might be the computer programmer that weighs $110.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's always who has the best friends too. You know
what I mean?
At the end of the day.
Like power could have just got flipped around here real quick.
And that's what I've noticed too. Sorry, I just want to interject just for 2 seconds on that. And I've noticed this too.
Yeah.
Is, you and I have been involved in getting to look at certain people in our communities to see, like, and I'm not like, this is like, I'd say there's like a large expanse. So if anybody hears this and thinks we're singling anybody out, I'm not at all. I'm just looking at this huge expanse of people that all want to make a difference. But they want to make a difference as long as they're the face of the difference.
Is that a bad thing though?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Because I don't think that works. I think what happens is you say that the 250-pound guy with the club wins. I disagree. I'd say it's 250 smaller men with 250 clubs that make the difference.
Maybe all the people that you're saying, I want to be a freedom fighter. What I'm hearing is French Revolution, right? you get a whole bunch of people together that are saying this isn't right.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and you get a few people with the big clubs that say, no, it is right. And now you get 1 million people all saying suddenly the power is in the smaller 110-pound people that all unite together. So maybe it is important that we stand. Maybe it is important that we all stand together. And
and that's where it crosses into. That's where if you wanted to, you could bury every argument I've ever had. Right? Because I've always said, be the 250-pound guy with the club. I've always said that. And then I just turned around and said, be 251-pound guys.
Right, exactly.
With
That's
clubs.
my point. Yeah.
But what my take is on that, and I've had that argument in my head 100 times. So you're not wrong.
So Tanner says to self.
Yeah, but I say to self, it's like, no, I want 250 pound men with clubs. That's what I want. So that's what I mean is if everybody takes the accountability to shut the fuck up, stop looking at everybody else as your barometer of how you're going to live your fucking life and just say, I just need to be the baddest motherfucker I know how to be. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to join with a bunch of other bad motherfuckers. We're going to win. We're going to destroy, 20 of us can destroy 250 computer programmers.
I hate Tanner's analogy because where he always comes back to is he's basically describing the Hells Angels.
Eventually, right? Yeah. But just to take kind of what you were saying earlier and just to add, I'm not going to argue that you're wrong. I do agree with what you're saying of just what everybody is doing is trying to propagate their own genes and that's their line. And I think that's the underlying program. I think that's evolutionary, what everything is. And you're right on that. But I think that was true for the first couple thousand years of our evolutionary progression. And then we hit a point where we become self-realized. We could consciously become aware of our own mortality and all these things, and that we could transcend this idea of what this was. I don't think at that time they knew what that was and they had the evolutionary needs of what they were really down, but you started to see it because this is my argument. What religion was trying to get people to transcend that of exactly what you said, of doing everything you can. So they came up with these 10 commandments, right? That is to say, like, these are things you cannot do. We know everybody just is going to do whatever they can to propagate themselves and to make their genes. They might not know why that happens, but it's become self-evident to them. So now they say, and that is causing some problems because we've grown to a size and to having societies where that's kind of starting to break down, right? That works. Everybody looking out for themselves or looking out for their tribe with what's good for them works to a certain size, but eventually it grows too big and they realize that. So then they say, okay, what is the most easy way we can put some sort of rules in place to try and temper that and trying to get people to try and transcend that? And that's where it came in. So now, as soon as that starts, now maybe at that point, it's still 99% people doing that. And then 1%, I don't know what you want to call it, like free will or transcendent.
Bacteria.
And then I think over the years you can do that. And that's where I see, when you say, what is the goal is to be the most powerful. But to me, it's to find the ways to transcend that in the best ways and then to live that life and to show people that there's better ways, right? Like the argument of find something that is important to you and stand behind it. That is my idea of what is transcending that is now. There's certain things that is always what it is, but I have certain values and I'm struggling to find the right words to articulate this, but I feel like that is what transcended. That is what people are after. Everybody's always trying to transcend whatever this thing is. They're always trying to get to the next level. And I feel like that is what a lot of this is trying to escape that because what
does getting to the next level mean to you? Does it mean success?
I don't think you're going to like what it means to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying.
What is that next level? Yeah. That's 100%.
What
the question is.
Yeah, 100%.
Like when people say, I want to get to the next level, what does that mean?
To me, that means transcending this tribal nonsense that keeps us held back in this, right? What we talked about, right? Going back to this echo chambers, that's naturally going to happen. But to change that permeability of those echo chambers so that you can see the other side. Why you're going to hate this? I think it's love and compassion. I think that's the answer to all this. I think you need to be strong. You need to be self-accountable, but you need to have the only way to make those people that are weak by yelling at them and calling them weak. That's never going to make them come onto your side. What you need to do is have love and compassion. Say, I understand why you're weak. That makes a lot of sense to me, right? This whole system is designed to make you weak, right? And it's very easy. And you can sit there and keep continuing this, keep just sitting on the Fortnite, keep blaming the rest of the world. Or, and this is why I'm finding those value systems, then living by example for that. I'm going to live my life where I have certain values that I hold higher than that. And self-accountability is at the very apex of that. And I feel like if that's what you live your life by, that's what's going to take those weak people, wake them up to what they're kind of wasting away with, and make them have a higher principle, that higher aim for. Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Aim. Your aim is so important, and you're going to aim, and you're never going to be able to aim perfectly, but at least aiming at something that's good and high, and a high aim.
Have a target.
It's going to get you closer. And then when you get closer, you're going to realize I wasn't aiming as good. I'm going to find a new target. I'm going to aim there, and you just keep aiming upwards. But I feel like if you keep the core of that at self-accountability, that's what's going to create change. That's what's going to create change in the world. I think that's almost what your argument, what I've heard you say over listening to your podcast and listening to you today. That's the real base of it, is take self-accountability. But more my argument is that if that is my goal, is bringing people in on self-accountability, I feel like the only way to bring people in is to put yourself into their shoes and see why they got there, have compassion for their weakness, because I can't blame these people. When you look at society and all the things we have, that's a very natural progression for me to follow, to see why you would end up in that spot. Right. So now if I approach somebody, instead of saying, hey, I think you're weak, I think you're dog shit, your whole ideas are out of whack, you say, hey, I think there's a better way to do this, and I think you'll have a lot more happiness. I think you'll have a lot more positivity in your life. I think you'll have a lot more bounty. I think you're going to see just more things accumulate. Like all these goals that you see, that you want, those are achievable, but not with how you're living your life right now. And I feel like that all comes back to that idea. And that's why I feel like I love listening to your podcast, because I feel like I agree with you 99% of the time, but I just have a different way of. No, I agree with you a lot too. I see myself more. Yeah,
fuck, that's dark,
so you're saying,
but
I got a chance.
But I feel like, but I feel like you come in. But I agree with what you're trying to get at. I just feel like I see different avenues to get there, right? And something you were saying earlier, and actually it was both of you guys were talking about this. I heard it. I won't be able to say it in the exact words where you got there, but it was something about what your goal is and how you accomplish it. Because this is where I see so much issues with people that they say they want racial equality and all this stuff, but really what they want is racial equality, how they want to get there.
That's what they want.
Yeah.
That's,
and if anybody,
that's what I hear you saying in what you just said, even.
Yeah.
Is, sorry, just finish what you're going to say. I don't want to cut you off.
So just what I'm getting at with that is, so much of the time people out themselves, they're saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. But by their actions, if somebody is trying a different route to get to that same spot, but it shows a different way, they will hold them down, right? One of the best examples, actually somebody showed me this example, is, do you guys know who Daryl Davis is?
No.
So he's been on Joe Rogan a couple times. He's this African-American gentleman. For years he's been doing this. He goes.
It's actually racist.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
Africa, you know?
So he goes and sits with these KKK members and has conversations with them.
Yeah.
And makes them change their tune. I think he's collected over like 30, maybe it was like 300. I don't know. I think it had a 3 in it. Robes of these ex-members that have changed their tune because just they'd never had somebody show them the error of their ways, show them that this idea of what they have of what a black person is in their head is different from a real articulate, intelligent guy that shows them what that can be. But now you see these people that go after Daryl Davis because he's doing it differently. They say, you can't even speak to them. That is, you're dignifying them just by having a response. And that shows the error of their ways. They're saying, hey, I just want equality. I don't care how we get there. But with their actions, they're saying something completely different. They're saying, I want equality and I want it this way. And you better get on board or we're going to label you and we're going to do all these things. And that's what I see in all these different ways. I mean, that's one obvious one that you make clear points. But I feel like you see this a lot. And one of those things that go with it is now that self-accountability and taking that on yourself. Now you're building up your own values and have an ideology system. If you don't do that and you're going to blame everything else, you feel really empty, right? And I feel like what used to fill that hole is religion, but religion has been just hacked to pieces over the last couple 100 years, right? To the point where now not a lot of people have that. So now they have this hole in them and they fill it with whatever ideology they can, whatever's easy, right? I can be a social justice warrior and that is my identity. I'm going to fill that role because that's natural and I'm going to fall into that. But now they find
everybody wants to be part of a gang, man.
Right. Exactly. But what
we all do.
But what shows the error of that way is now when the proposed goals of what your ideology really stands for is this one thing, but you're not actually after that. You're after your team and you're just trying to support what you've built your ideology around. If something else shakes that, but has a better way of getting to the purported goals of what you're saying it is, and you can't show that and you can't change your mind and you just try attacking or name calling or all these things, that is clear. It shows me at least that you are not actually what you're saying you're under. You are just playing these tribal games that we've been playing forever and you haven't they're trying to say, I've transcended this. I'm on the good side, but you haven't. You're just stuck into it. You just can't see it. And that's very interesting to me to see, because I feel like I see it all over the place now.
Wonder when everybody's got their own bias.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to control their own power, right? Like as you say, everybody wants their own biology or their own DNA to continue. And as we've come into, if there was only the three of us in the bush here, there's enough meat and food for us all to survive all on our own. But as soon as you start to collect, you need laws. You need parameters because otherwise, what you define as fair or just or right we all disagree, and before you know
what you deserve, entitlement.
Right. And so I wonder, in recent history, I just got to go back to like the signing of the Magna Carta, to where the root of where we stand today is basically based on, let's take the power out of one and let's start to spread it over more and say, how do we get along so that it's not okay to slit somebody else's throat. It's not okay to take your horses. It's not okay to steal your gold. And these primary freedoms, which I know part of us, because I've heard some of us mock people standing up for freedoms. What is freedom, right? Like you were saying.
I mock them, yeah.
No, and I've heard other people, like I was in Paradise Hill Maverick Party, which is a separatist party now.
Yeah.
I went out to their meeting here a couple of days ago. And it was interesting because, we went for a beer after in the Paradise Hill bar. And there's a couple of farmers saying like, "Oh, are you a freedom fighter?" Like making fun of it. It's interesting because that has merit with me. I'm like, oh, interesting. I'm doing like Jordan Peterson. Like, what is the crowd saying, right? And but I wonder if we don't have to hold tight to those to say what are those fundamental freedoms? What are the protective mechanisms that say this is right and this is wrong, and we agree as three. So even if Tanner disagrees, we're saying no, we're going to hold this as a society.
Well, then you decide if I want to be part of your gang.
Well, but it's hard to define what's right or wrong. I get it.
That's what I mean. But it's
but if we have these are the 5 rules we live on. Freedom to associate, freedom to speak out, freedom to move, freedom to. If we're like, I don't care what you say, as long as it stands on those freedoms. So disagree, be a tribe, don't be a tribe, do what you got to do, man. But if these are the ones we stand on, and outside of those, now we're starting to risk to where tribalism occurs and where some people have a say and other people don't. So I wonder if we don't just erase this whole, everything we're talking about, just go, what are those fundamental freedoms that we need to survive that allow us to not end up at a point to where we have tribes to where we kill each other?
Right.
But if you end up with tribes don't kill each other, I don't think you have a healthy balance.
Oh, you think
that's a natural course?
You think we're going to end up killing each other?
I think that what we have right now is the byproduct of tribes that don't kill each other.
Yeah, we're seeing the manifestations of the pain points, and that's
well. You got to think. I am not a race. Well, that's weird. See, I'm not racially driven to where I look at somebody and I hate them because of the color of their skin. That's not the way I roll. I'm very racially aware because of different cultural ideology that lies between different people. I have a black guy that works with me at the gym, and we talk about this all the time. It's like, I look at you different because you're black. You look at me different because I'm white. And we both are like, yeah, of course we do. Of course you do. And if you don't think so, you're crazy.
Yeah, or you're just not as honest with yourself. And,
exactly. It's like, even to have that ideology to say I'm going to treat this person different to treat them the same is the same. So regardless, what I'm saying though is we've brought in all these different demographics of people now into every corner of the world for the most part. And everybody has their own way of thinking about things. Yeah. They just do. I mean, it's just the way it is. And now all of a sudden everybody's kind of, grinding each other's heads against each other. And like you said, it's like, how do we come up with 5 fundamental? Well, you don't.
You don't? Why not?
Because you don't, because it's going to take a lot more than a few years to figure that out.
But like, Magna Carta was signed in,
but why was it signed?
Why was it signed?
It was because
I think a bunch of people looked at each other and said, I think we have more power together against the Almighty King.
Something. Mm-hmm. So until we're against something, I don't think we're going to sign shit. Does that make sense? Like, I don't, like, we're going to need an enemy if we're going to write laws and freedoms. Like right now we're in this weird, like, in my opinion,
it is weird. I agree.
It's this weird no man's land where it's like, nobody believes in anything. There's this, like you call it, there's this, this power vacuum, let's call it, where we've erased all sense of I would just supposed to say morality, but it's not, because morality I don't believe exists, but we've erased all sense of downloaded or taught morality. And there's people stepping into the power vacuum and giving us new ways to look at things. You know what I mean? So, like,
I think that's exactly what I said earlier about religion. That used to be
it used to be morality. The thing. That's what I've always said. Or that's what I've been saying lately is, why is there such an attack on Christianity right now? It's because it gets in the fucking way of the government. Now, whether or not they will ever admit that or not, Christianity is anti-communism. They have their own communism going on, but it's anti-government communism, right? Like Christianity was built on, like, I'm hardcore Scandinavian descent. So if I was to go back and live in my ancestors' shoes, I probably wouldn't like Christians a whole lot. They probably looked a lot like Nazis. You know what I mean? Because they stepped in and said, hey, you're going to believe in this new one God. And the Vikings said, you can't believe in, no, they weren't even called Vikings at the time. They would have been Northmen. And they would have said, you can't believe in one God. You need to believe in, like, various gods so that you have a sense of accountability to different areas of your psyche. And they said, no, you're going to believe in this or we kill you. That sounds very, very, very familiar to Soviet Union, to Nazi Germany. So, you know, it's weird how those entities of totalitarianism have ended up going head to head against Christianity, which was its own sense of totalitarianism at one point. It's just, it became the norm.
How come you say Christianity was totalitarianism?
Well, the Crusades, have you ever heard of those?
Oh, like, but you're saying that when people twisted into what they need.
Yeah, like what happened was Christianity started out as this, do you know what? I have a lot of respect for Christian values. Because I think that they're pretty well written as far as how I like to live my life out here.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm Christian by any sense, but I can really understand. I like a lot of what they say. I don't believe any of their stories. They're just crazy. But I think that there's a very cool undertone to the way we live out here. And North America was built on Christian values. That's just, that's the way it was.
It seems to have worked.
It worked really good. I mean, Christian values and democracy have seemed to fit together quite nicely. They just have. I don't know why, and maybe somebody smarter than me can to break that down. But at the end of the day, I think that Christianity had its time of forcing people to really buy into it. And I think that we've seen other, you know, it was 2,000 years ago, and there was one, somebody talked about, he goes, history's a weird thing, where he goes, we look at Adolf Hitler or Stalin or all these people right now as just the worst fucking human beings ever. But yet we like look at Genghis Khan and we look at all these people like,
well, it's kind of interesting, actually.
You know, and we look at them as like, wow, like look at what they did.
They were so good at killing people and taking over nations.
Right?
Hey, Napoleon.
So it's like history has this way of cleansing, right? Yeah. And it's funny how Christianity's done a really good job of withstanding a certain cleansing, or they cleanse themselves very quickly of the crimes that they actually committed against humanity. If you look
think about that for a minute. Why is Alexander the Great looked at so
Alexander the Great probably wasn't great to a lot of people.
but
he was probably Alexander the fucking asshole to a lot of people. But to the people that wrote the books, it was pretty awesome.
History is wrote by the victors.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's exactly
like we're talking about. Kind of got all fucking sidetracked or whatever. But
what do you think, Dick? Where do you want to take this? Yeah.
Well, I got to
get going.
Yeah, well, if you got to get going, I mean, hey, we can wrap it right up. I was just going to ask a couple questions. I was curious about the book club you always talk about. I feel like I'm super jealous that you have that. I feel like that's something that I would really enjoy doing just because of how much I enjoy reading and enjoy these types of conversations around them. And I feel like that would be something I really want. So I had a couple questions about that. I had a couple questions about your guys' podcast, but I also just had so much fun.
You want a fire answer? You want to?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, you didn't get to answer the first question I asked of the podcast.
Yes.
What do you get out of your doing your podcast? I'm curious to get that answer. And Tanner, if you need to get out of here,
No, let's just do a quick rapid fire.
So the what do I get out of the War and Weakness podcast?
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I'll be as fast as I can. Some people want to be rich and famous. It means nothing to me. Like I want enough money that my family can survive, but I just don't have any aspiration to ever be Joe Rogan. I actually think the opposite. I think it's actually amazing being nobody.
Hold. Yeah.
You know, like because we came out here and there's no paparazzi, there's nobody judging. Like people don't give a shit who Ken Rutherford is, right? And I like that.
Yeah. A lot of people
don't give a shit, right? Yeah, mostly everybody. Actually, everybody. But when you talk about the book club and you talk about anything I've ever done in life is it's done on a deadline. So you say, someday I want to, right? Well, someday we want to do a lot of shit.
Yeah.
But unless there's a deadline, it ain't getting done.
Yeah.
And so the podcast, when Tanner talked to me about it, it was kind of cool. It's like a War and Weakness is just do a quick 360 on yourself. When I say a quick, I mean, I thought like a year. Let's see what this does. Just do a spin around and say, be bluntly honest with yourself. You know, for me, I'll talk to myself. You know, what are you really good at? What do you suck shit at? And if you short up some of your weaknesses, not all of them, but some of them, what does that look like? You know, how am I performing as a dad? Performing as a father and a husband and a friend and my business and as a teacher, as a hockey coach. And those are some pretty dark conversations with yourself. And you get to look at each other and go, yeah, I was hoping to kind of bury that one and kind of lie to myself and just kind of dust over it. And we'll look at that one another 10 years, maybe. No, let's look at it right now. So that's kind of what it does for me is it allows me to short my weakness. Second question was what?
Can I re-answer mine too?
Yeah, of course.
So that's awesome. Cause like, I think that what the War on Weakness has done, cause I answered off the start kind of.
We weren't firing yet.
Yeah. We weren't. Yeah. I have a better answer.
Go for it.
When he does his, I'll up him one more.
Yeah. We're going to keep going back.
I want to feed off of what Kenny's talking
Yeah.
about. Actually, you've inspired me.
Did I get your feelings?
Yeah,
Did I get your feelings?
My feelings are just fucking
all three of them, hey?
Fucking dripping everywhere. You know what? I found with the podcast, and now this isn't why we started it, but why it's now become what it has been in my mind, is I have a very dark kind of brash attitude towards it. And Kenny has a very light, articulate attitude towards it. And I love the fact that, you know what? No matter what happens during that podcast, I want you to think. That's what I want. So when you hear what I say, if you're on the other side of the fence, or you're on Kenny's side of the fence, right? Let's just say we're dealing with the same demographic, different mindsets. I want you to be like, maybe I need to accept the darkness a little bit more. Maybe I need to, smell the breath of the beast a little bit more than I want to some days, right? Sometimes maybe I'm a little too fucking soft. But at the same time, too, is there's a lot of guys on my side that, we call them, dicks in real life. But there's a lot of guys that just don't have a lot of time for emotion. And I think that listening to Ken, and this is within our own, and we talk about, the tribal thing, and I know that it's dangerous, but at the same time, I think it's not dangerous. And, as long as we're speaking to the people that like what we do, there's going to be the side that, there's the devil and the angel on your shoulder, so to speak. If I got to be the cowboy in the black hat, so to speak, that tells you that life ain't fucking fair and that it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, and you understand that a little bit better at the end of the day. That's what I want, and I gotta go there. I feel the obligation to go there. And Kenny, though, wearing a white hat and riding a white horse, so to speak, maybe we'll talk to the dark side of your personality and say, maybe it's time to lighten up on yourself once in a while. You know what I like? Maybe this isn't, I can live in the darkness all fucking day long. It doesn't bother me, but I don't know a lot of people that could handle it either. And then like, there's probably a lot of people that maybe live in the light a little too much, that can't handle, like that want to come out of it. So I think what it does is it takes those two sides. You know, I don't know how the fuck we got together on this. I mean, but at the end of the day, I don't know if you could find a better dynamic, as far as what I could say anyway, of taking those two sides and bringing them into a more central location. Does that make sense, Ken? Would you agree with that?
It makes sense. It's funny that the all my modern life, what I mean modern life is since I went to university, is I've never understood it, because like when we grew up, like we didn't grow up in a town with a lot of money. We grew up north of the river where, you know, there's people that live on. We
grew up with a town with a lot of money, Ken. Like they built a new house in 1964 and that's the last one.
And it's always kind of been odd for me is that, you know, we grew up with people that had families that pretty much lived on wild meat, you know, like not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a rough, tough time. I mean, like people would find it hard to believe that I used to drink too much and bar fight on Friday nights and wasn't afraid to take on somebody that was 220 pounds and do what I had to do, kind of thing. Right. But then I go to university, I get a clean haircut and everybody looks at me like I'm a chartered accountant and thinks I'm the biggest wimpo in the world. Right. But I think there's enough crossover between us that I like that. I like being civilized. I like thinking. I like being compassionate. I like hope. I think without hope, what does humanity have? Mm. People aren't inspired by doom and gloom. You know, I coach a lot of hockey, and if you come in and you say, yeah, we're down 3-1 in the third period, but I've seen you guys do what you've done before. I know you got it in your heart. You can do this. You're inspiring hope to try to get 100. Okay, you can't get more than 100%. You're trying to get 92% out of them instead of 84. Because if you come in there and say, you're screwed, you're pieces of shit, you got nothing left in you, I'm embarrassed to say I coach you. I've been coached by those people. Yeah. They flatten you, right? They're negative values what they are. And I've seen the other opposite side of that is where people come in and say, yeah, you're bruised up, you're beat up, you got a limp arm. So let's see what you got. I bet you can come out of this. And to me, that's kind of where I spin at it. And Tanner, you've said it to me before, is that I can't remember how you say it. It's interesting. You say, I've seen the darkness. You have some darkness into you.
Yeah. You got a little darkness.
Yeah. If I have to get ugly, I can get ugly. Yeah,
absolutely.
You know,
otherwise
so if I have to get ugly, I will, but I don't think that's where we need to be. No. I think
there's time for it.
There's time for it. Yeah.
And honestly too, is like, and if somebody can take, here's the thing is it's like parents, you know, if you can take, and I don't look at us as garners of like these children that are under us. I don't look at it that way at all. But like, if you can take, well, my goal has become in this podcast recently, just from really watching how we've been operating, is say you're a listener and you can be a little bit like me in the extremes and a little bit like Ken in the extreme.
You're kind of is. I'm getting a sense that you kind of are.
You're better than both of us if you can do that. So if we can provide, if you listen to this podcast and have the compassion and like, what would you say, like the ability, the articulation, let's say, of Ken in your life, and then be able to accept the darkness as I provide it to you, you're better than both of us at the end. And I think that that's all you're ever trying to do as bacteria, as I like to say before, is just trying to create something stronger than what you were. And you know, that's it. It's when we started this, that wasn't what I thought, but I've come into this ideology with it. And I think that that's where I hope we go with this. And, you know, is that it's like your kids in a way. And I don't mean to call our listeners our kids. I don't mean to be overpowering in any way, shape, or form to anybody. But what I think is that if you listen to both sides and can accept a little bit of both, you're better than we are. And that's what I think we want. No?
Oh, it's interesting. So Nick, you strike me as a very balanced human being. Like you've got what's the word I'm looking for? You're a balanced person. I can tell that I think that you're willing to accept new ideas, new thoughts, new opinions.
I like to, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, do you like it more to the Tanner dark or the Kenny light?
It's
or you're right in the middle.
I feel like I feel like the middle makes me feel like I'm far away from both of your points. I feel like I somehow, and I've always felt this way, cool. I somehow exist simultaneously in both.
That's cool.
like I say, that's why I really enjoy listening to you guys, because I see that and I see different points of it. I almost see like you are providing the ideal of where we need to get to. And I agree with you. And you call it a war on weakness. And I almost just reframe that. And I see the same things, and kind of in my language, when I put that is, a war on a lack of self-accountability, because I feel like weakness is a lack of self-accountability. And I see that, but I feel like what Ken provides, and what I'm saying is, you're not going to get those people to understand that. That might be what we need to do, and we can understand that, but maybe your strategy, we'll call it, right? Like, you have the vision, but you need Ken's strategy to bring them over to understand the value in that, right? Yeah. Because like I said, if you're going to yell at someone and that, or I shouldn't even say that, because there's some people that need that coach that's going to yell at them if they're going to get
some people to respond to different types of coaching
exactly,
styles,
but you need all that.
Like, and just to add on to that is, in general, if Kenny and I had two teams, he will build a team, I will vet a team, if that makes sense. So I'll just see who I have left at the end. Right. And that's the way that I operate, where he's going to take what he has
and build them
up. And I used to think I could do that. I can't, but I'm very good at vetting.
What's the difference between build up and vet up?
Oh, so like give me vet out. So give me 50 people.
And you want 5.
I want 5. And I give you 50 people, and you're going to make 5 teams of 10 guys that are all.
Oh, you know what?
You're
going
to try to manipulate them.
Yeah, to me, it's like
making them better. Where I just want
with my students or with my hockey players.
Yeah.
It's like, for you to walk away, you're going to have to give up on yourself, because I'm not giving up on you.
Yeah. Where I'm like, I want to force you to give up on yourself, so I know you're not.
Yeah, and I love watching a human being that's like,
so you're not in the way of the team.
Thinking that they're stupid, or they're not a good hockey player, or they don't fit, and find a way to make them go, I think I do belong here. I think I can go. Like, I give you the example in one of the last podcasts I remember, where someone thinks they can't learn, or they can't read, or they're stupid, or they just can't make it here, and watch them go to where they say, I can learn, I can read, I can conquer a mountain. That to me is like, as soon as I do, if I'm able to be a part of that story, that's like, maybe, and I was coming back to you is on the podcast. It's interesting is when, to me, and I know you got to go, Tanner, we can cut out of here, is the way I come at these podcasts is, what is success? And I've really enjoyed sitting with you here, Nick. You're a cool dude.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean that. You got a cool vibe to you. And even if, we've talked for way too long, probably according to consumer numbers of what you should be, we're way too long. Maybe who gives a shit? If the only 2 or 3 people that listen to this are your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren, Nick, and they go back and go like, man, great-grandpa Nick was a cool dude. He had some cool thoughts, right? Then who cares? Just be you. Be authentic. Money, who gives a shit? As long as you got a full belly, you got some gas in your car, who cares? Do we all want to be Joe Rogan? Sean Newman, I had a conversation with him about it. Might be the worst thing that could happen to you, become Joe Rogan.
Could be.
Like Joe Rogan can't sneeze without somebody, watching him or following him or knocking him down. But anyways, this has been really cool. It's been a cool vibe, actually. And maybe someday, we should do I know it's hard to be together. Maybe if you're back here again, or maybe we come to Grand Prairie. It'd be kind of cool to bring Sean Newman into it, actually.
For sure.
Because he's got a cool vibe to him too, right? I think you're interviewing him on
tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be the second time I have Sean, and that's how I actually heard. The reason this all came up, even before you guys started this podcast, I heard you on Sean's podcast.
Yeah.
And I recognized in you something in Slave Lake, that there's guys like you, right? And I liken it, this will mean nothing to you, but I liken you to a family called the Stassos in Slave Lake, who are just the epitome of everything that I see the best in humanity. And being good to your fellow man, caring deeply, wanting the best. And I feel like I see a lot of that in myself. Is I don't see people for what they are now. I see you for the full potential of who you could be. And I hold them to that. And some people don't like that. And it pushes some people away if you expect a lot, right? Like, my buddy might tell me, hey, I have a dream that, 20 years from now, I want to open my own, golf training thing where I fit clubs and trade guys swings and have a track man there. And what I'm going to say is, no, you can do that in 5. You start that right now, start coaching, because all it's going to take is hours and repetition. You do that, you can get a space for cheap, you can do all this stuff, and I'm going to see it because I'm going to push you to what I know you can do. I'm not going to let you quit on yourself, or not even quit on yourself, but not hold yourself to the standards of what I see in you. And I feel like that is so undervalued and so needed in society. You need the Tanners too that are going to,
they need more of you guys.
Yeah. And,
I think you
balance.
guys are a lot alike.
Balance.
Yeah. Well,
Balance.
I mean, it's, you guys are a lot alike.
Yeah, for sure.
Is
definitely.
compassion.
But you know what, like, you should know that, like, from my coaching, you learn a lot from coaching athletes and students.
For sure.
Is I come off as a soft, kind, Care Bear kind of a dude.
Yeah.
But if I talk to you 3 or 4 times and I'm like, be good to your fellow human, be good to your team, stick up for your teammates, don't be selfish. If I talk to you 3 times and on the 4th time you take another cheap penalty that says I don't give a shit about the team, I don't care if you die.
Yeah.
That's harsh, but I'm like, get off the team. I'm done. Yeah. Right. And so I believe in humans, but at some point in time, you got to cut ties.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't like, I mean, when we talk about, like, even when I say the black hat, white hat, I don't mean that in you're a pussy in any way.
No, it's overlap.
Because like we met fighting, for fuck's sake. Sorry, like, got this together, beating the
I actually
wheels
love fighting.
off
But
of each other.
this family, what'd you say they were?
The Stassos, right? And I don't know why that comes to mind. I feel like you have to meet them to see what it is, right? And to see what I'm seeing in you. And I just feel like you come across that so rarely, and I feel like it's such a powerful good. And then when I heard that you guys are starting a podcast, I was really excited to hear. I had no idea who Tanner was in this point. When I listened to the first episode, that was the first time I got to know you, but I see myself in Tanner as well. And I have a lot of that. And when I said I'm the eternal optimist, I say that, but again, I'm also the eternal pessimist. I'm always seeing the dark side of this stuff. And I do the same thing. It's almost, I feel like I'm always so curious and so not willing to take what everybody says to me. I always want to do it myself. And I'm so untrusting of any source of information. I have to flip it around in my own head a couple times, which I think is severely lacking. But I do it from both sides. I have an inner Ken and an inner Tanner in my head all the time, running these scenarios through all this COVID stuff of the worst and the most nefarious and the most conspiratorial minded of how this could be, and then the most good of this. How is this nobody's fault and just the system? And then I hold those two ideas in my head, and what seems more true to me, right? And that's what I always go back to. In doing that all the time, I have a lot of trust in my head I might not be able to articulate the reasons why I feel something, but I feel like I trust my intelligence, I trust my gut, and if it tells me something, even if I'm not there yet, I feel like 9 times out of 10, if I give myself enough time, eventually I'll find out why, and I'll acquire more information. I'll listen to a podcast. Oh, that's why I believe that. I've always felt that and gone with that and trusted my gut and lived my life by that, but I couldn't articulate why. And then I'll find the reasons for it. But I don't know. That's just always been in me. I've always been curious. I was a terrible student in high school. I mean, I say that.
Were you?
Just I would get into a teachers. If I didn't agree with them, I would argue and I would fight. Or if I got in trouble for something and I deserved it, I would take it 100%. But if I saw either getting in trouble for something I didn't think I deserved, or they were wrong on this, I wouldn't let it go. Or if I saw them go after one of my friends and I didn't think they deserved it, that was my big thing. I hated bullying. I hated people being treated unfairly. I hated somebody attacking someone. And I felt like as a young child, I was intellectually ahead. And there was times where I could see these teachers just using that fact that they're intellectually further than these kids to treat them and say that they're wrong in the situation. And I'm saying, no, I can see this. I know you're wrong. You're being weak right now and you're picking on this kid, and I couldn't stand it. But that's always been in me. This curiosity and this person that I am, that I'm finally letting out on this podcast, this has always been within me. But I learned very quickly that being that fully, wild, weird, random person that I am doesn't fit certain circumstances, right? On a hockey team, they don't need some wacko. They need someone that's going to, be a bit more Tanner in that situation. So I learned to be that for that time. What is required of me? But I found that also stresses me out when I can't just be who I am. Like I can be on this podcast. It's the first time I found something where I can be all these different parts of who I am at once. And I don't have to be embarrassed about anything. I don't have to be whatever. I can show all this, right? And if somebody wants to make fun of me for, loving Harry Potter the way I do, but then they can listen to me talk like I did with Andrew and show the depths of love I have for this blood sport of MMA. Like you can't label me with nothing, nobody knows who I am. I don't know who the fuck I am. I'm still trying to figure out who the fuck this weirdo is up here.
This is if you don't like it, shut it the fuck up.
Exactly. It's free. It's free. I don't even make, this is a money pit for me. I just get so much enjoyment out of this. I'm buying these fucking stupid expensive mics and mic arms and this Rodecaster because I love this. I've never loved anything like I love this.
It's kind of pure though, isn't it? When you're not doing it for money.
Money is the
an
least
innocence
of it.
that comes out of that.
But it's tough. And that's actually one of the questions I had is needing to make money on the pod, because I've heard you guys talk about this too. But I feel like that sends the wrong message to people, because I am trying to grow and I'm trying to find it, but it's not for the money. It's for the access, right? And I feel like this is something that me and Sean have talked about off the podcast, is what we're jealous of Joe Rogan is not the money. It's not the fame. It's the access to, if he wants to speak to someone, you know, like that excitement I got of having those authors on that aren't, it's not J.K. Rowling, man. It's not Tolkien. I guess Tolkien's dead, but you know, it's not those people. But to me, that means a lot. And to have them come on and to be able to talk to them means so much to me. And it gave me so much joy and whatever that is.
Well, what do you think? Like Tanner's a normal, and you're giving me the vibe like I was giving you the time when I had to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, no.
Hey, well, book her whenever you want.
Finish
For
up,
sure.
I can't help leave. Like, I don't want to leave.
It's fun. It's
Fair enough.
been a cool.
I'm gonna be a shit.
It's
but I
fun.
don't wanna leave.
I've been there. Like we've talked about on one of our podcasts, these old fellas that were from the riverbanks, the formal boys, and you talk about the family that you're talking about from Slave Lake. Maybe who gives a shit who gets the famous actors and the famous this person, famous. Who gives a shit? Maybe it's just cool just to be you and just to hang out with the Slave Lake folks and the Grand Prairie folks. And if somebody trips in, if somebody finds you, like, up in my area, our area is Grant Kuipers, he has a hunting lodge, and it tends to bring in a lot of movie stars and MMA people. Actually, Matt Hughes has been up and stuff. Yeah. So if Matt Hughes trips into the Slave Lake, Alberta, and you get to hang out with them for a night and have a few beers, cool.
Yeah.
Maybe that's you. I kind of wonder if we don't chase fame and money, thinking and find out it's not the end of the rainbow that we should have been aiming for.
That's exactly how I ended up here, because what I was chasing for so long was money. And I went and I got a business degree because I thought that was the easiest way to get money, and money equals happiness. That's what everybody's told me my entire life. I get to this point, and I was very lucky to be able to get the job that I'm still currently doing. But at that time, when I started at 23 years old with, 50, 60 employees that are all older than me, I'm running this business that is doing huge volumes and very successful.
Just
at
the
time.
Petro-Canada business?
And just jumping into it.
Oh, do you run it now?
Yeah. Like
you run the family business?
I run that one branch of it, right? The Grand Prairie area. That's kind of my operation. I have full autonomy to do whatever I want.
Maybe I'm missing something. Are you working for your dad, or are you working?
Yeah.
With
dad. Yeah. So he owns the whole thing, and he's got all this stuff, but then an opportunity came up for the same people that do what he does and what Jason does here in that Grand Prairie orbit.
Oh, I see. So you're working in the business for somebody else that has the same business as your dad and as Jason.
Kind of, yes.
Am I asking two personal questions?
No,
Okay.
Not at all. I'm wide open book. I'll talk about any of this, right? Like, I have no problem with it. It's just complex. It's hard to explain, right? You're right, but then it's still owned by him. So under Suncor's eyes, who's the parent company of it, I am in the same position as my dad, right? Like, we're both marketers.
What is Suncor?
Suncor is...
It's like big Suncor?
Yeah, big Suncor. So then we're a marketer.
I'm out.
Yeah.
We're good.
For sure, of course. Thanks again for popping on, and we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, let's give her. Yeah. We're good. We could chat off the mics if you want.
For sure. Well, hey, let's wrap this up. I just want to say a big thank you to both of you for coming on. Thank you for doing that podcast and all that.
No, that's good. We can chat off the mic.
We've already been. We're about to hit 3 hours in about 17 seconds, so I got to wrap it up anyway.
You can cut and slice and dice this or toss it in the garbage if you want, Nick. This has been wonderful.
This has been perfect. This has exceeded my expectations. I had some high expectations going in, and it blew them out of the water. So thanks, guys, for coming on. I really enjoyed this, and I know we'll do it again here soon.
Keep doing what you're doing, Nick. You got something going here. I mean that.
You guys as well. Yeah. You guys as well. I listen to a fuck ton of podcasts. I'm absolutely obsessed. So I know what I see in a good podcast, and it's that genuineness, and you guys have that, and that's what keeps me coming back and keeps listening to you guys. So
awesome, Nick.
You guys
thanks
keep
for doing this
too. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, boys.
Nope.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I really enjoyed recording it. It was something that I'd wanted to do with these two gentlemen for a long time, and I think we'll probably be doing many of these in the future. I think probably some solo episodes with both Tanner and Ken are in order. I really like the chemistry they have together, and that's kind of why I wanted to introduce them to you guys together, but also I think they really have something to say on their own as well, so I'm sure they'll be happening again in the future, as well as many other I almost called it a threesome, but I probably should find a better terminology that the boys would like a little bit better than that, but you guys know what I'm saying. Like I say every time, always looking for help with the podcast. If anybody wants to come on board, I have a million different things that I want to do with this podcast. All it's going to take is a little couple of extra sets of hands to make them happen, but you don't need any expertise. If that sounds like something you want to try, reach out to me. Social medias for the VonDubCast or the email that I've thrown out in a couple of these episodes as well. Other than that, just tell a friend. That's how these podcasts spread. I always tell people it's word of mouth. the algorithms can only go so far. Really, what makes these podcasts grow is people telling other people about them. If you enjoyed the conversation, you think someone else would enjoy this conversation, a different one, please pass those on. It goes a really long way. And also sharing the posts, that kind of thing, giving me a follow on the social medias, that goes a million miles further than you ever thought it would. Same with the DMs, same with the conversations. Please reach out. I really like having conversations with you guys. It really makes me feel connected and makes me know that I'm on the right path when I'm hearing from you guys, and sometimes that I'm on the wrong path, and I hear that from you guys too. So it's either way, it's very important. If you guys could do that, I really appreciate it. Other than that, probably see you either later this week or next Monday to carry on with Lloydminster May. I think next Monday should be, who's next Monday? Oh, Mr. Sean Newman, I believe, the podcast king of Alberta. We'll have him on for a really, really important discussion in my own journey here. I think I may have talked to you guys a bit on the solo episode about what that conversation meant to me. But all these conversations I had while I was down in Lloyd were really, really special, and I really enjoyed all of them. So I hope you guys enjoy that and enjoy the rest of Lloydminster May. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.